Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Marcus Holloway, and I need to tell you what happened at Camp Blackwater. The rescue team found me 3 days ago, but I know they don't believe what I'm telling them. How could they? I barely believe it myself. I remember the sound of their boots on the wet ground, heavy steps getting closer to where I sat by the dying fire. When they called out, I answered them in Korean first, then in the old Kinol language my grandfather taught me, then in voices that weren't mine at all. We found him, one of them said into his radio. His name was Dave, I think. Big guy with a beard. But something's wrong with him, I tried to explain. I told them about Tommy and Frank and Pete, about what happened to them. But the words came out all mixed up, like someone else was talking through me. Tommy's grandfather came back, I said, hearing my voice change as I spoke. He's been waiting since 1923. Frank keeps talking about Soul, but he was never there. Not in this life. Dave stepped back. The other two rescue workers looked scared. One was a woman named Sarah. The other was young, maybe 20. They all had the same look on their faces, like they were looking at something that shouldn't exist. Sir, we need you to come with us, Sarah said. She was trying to sound calm, but her voice shook. You're hurt. You need help. I laughed, but it wasn't my laugh. It was Pete's laugh, high and nervous like when he got scared. Hurt? We're all hurt. We've been hurt for 40 years, some of us for 80. That's when they saw the camp behind me. What was left of it anyway. The cabins were still smoking. Black wood and ash, where we used to sleep and eat and tell stories. The smell was wrong, though. It smelled like gunpowder and old coffee and something else. Something hungry. Where is everyone else? Dave asked. He was looking around, trying to understand. The report said there were 4 men working here. They're here, I said. I pointed to the fire pit where I'd built the funeral pyres. They're all here. Tommy's with his grandfather now. Frank found his way back to Korea. Pete scattered himself across time like seeds. The young one threw up, right there in the dirt. Sarah put her hand on her radio, ready to call for more help. Dave just stared at me like I was speaking in tongues, and maybe I was. Because when I opened my mouth again, Tommy's grandfather spoke through me. His English was broken, the way it would have been in 1923. The hunger walks between years, I said in his voice. Feeds on time itself. Holloway blood calls it, always has, always will. Then Frank's voice came out, talking about trenches and cold and the sound of mortars. But Frank had been in Korea, not World War I. These were memories that didn't belong to him. Check his eyes, Sarah whispered to Dave. Look at his eyes, they were right to be scared. When I looked in their faces, I could see myself reflected back. My eyes were wrong, different colors in each one. Blue like mine had always been, but also brown like Tommy's grandfather. Green like Frank's. Gray like Pete's used to be before. He'd lost them. We need to get him out of here, Dave said. Now! But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I had to tend the fires, had to make sure the consumed ones found their way home. 40 years. I'd been waiting to understand what happened to my grandfather, Thomas. 40 years since he disappeared from this same spot, this same cursed ground. My grandfather came here in 1923, I told them, my own voice now, clear and simple. He never came home. His whole crew vanished. They said it was an accident, but it wasn't an accident. I stood up and the rescue team stepped back. My legs were shaky, like I hadn't used them in days. Maybe I hadn't. Time gets confusing when you're between the feeding and the being fed. There's something in these woods, I said. Something that's been hungry for a very long time. It feeds every 40 years. Takes the same family every time, the Holloways. Dave was talking into his radio again, calling for a helicopter, a doctor, maybe a priest. They thought I was crazy. Trauma, they'd say later. Survivor's guilt, hallucinations from smoke and stress. But when they loaded me into their truck, when we drove away from Camp Blackwater, I heard it calling after us. Not with a voice like yours or mine, with voices I knew. Tommy's grandfather speaking Chinook, Frank calling out coordinates in Korean, Pete laughing that nervous laugh, and underneath it all my grandfather Thomas, still hungry after all these years, still waiting for the family debt to be paid. The rescue team found me alive, but I know the truth. I died 3 weeks ago, same as the others. I just haven't figured out how to stop talking yet. The hunger that walks between years isn't done with me. It's never done with the Holloways. And now you know my name, Marcus Holloway, the last one in the line, speaking to you from inside the belly of time itself. 2 days before the rescue team found me, I was alone. The camp was burning around me, but I wasn't trying to put out the fires. I was feeding them, one log at a time, watching the flames grow higher. The smoke was thick and black, but I could breathe just fine, maybe because I wasn't really breathing anymore. I had work to do. Important work. Tommy's body was heavy when I dragged it to the first pile of wood. His face looked peaceful, like he was sleeping, but his eyes were open, staring at something I couldn't see. Something in the trees. Don't worry, I told him. Your grandfather's waiting for you. My voice sounded calm. Too calm for someone dragging dead bodies around a burning camp. But everything felt calm now, like I was watching someone else do these things. Frank was next. He was harder to move, because he kept trying to talk. His mouth would open and close, no sound coming out. His hands moved like he was holding a rifle, fighting a war that ended before he was born. Souls that way, I said, pointing east. You'll find your way back. Pete was the worst. Not because he was heavy or difficult, because he wasn't there. Not all of him, anyway. Parts of Pete were scattered around the camp like puzzle pieces, a hand here, a foot there. His head was sitting by the fire pit, but his eyes had rolled back, all white, like looking at snow. You were always too sensitive, I told his head while I gathered the pieces. Too open to things. That's why it took you apart first. I built 3 funeral pyres, nice, neat stacks of wood and pine needles, the kind my grandfather taught me to make when I was little. Back when camping was fun and forests were just forests. While I worked, I talked to them, to Tommy and Frank and Pete. They talked back sometimes, not with their mouths because their mouths didn't work anymore. But I could hear them anyway. Tommy's. Grandfather spoke the most. His English was rough, but I understood him fine. The hunger comes every 40 years, he said through Tommy's voice. Feeds on Holloway blood, your blood. Been waiting for you, boy. I know, I said. I was arranging. Frank's arms across his chest. I found your journal. Grandpa Thomas wrote everything down. That's when I saw it. The leather book sitting on the ground next to my backpack. My grandfather's journal, the one I'd been looking for my whole life. The one that explained why he never came home in 1923. I picked it up with hands that weren't shaking. Hands that should have been shaking. The leather was old and cracked, but the pages were clean, like someone had been taking care of it all these years. The first entry was dated August 15th, 1923. My grandfather's handwriting, neat and careful. Something wrong with these woods. The other men feel it too. Bill's been talking in his sleep, speaking some language none of us know. Says he's been having dreams about Korea. But Bill's never been to Korea, never been anywhere but Oregon. I flipped through more pages, entry after entry, describing the same things I'd been seeing. Men talking in voices that weren't theirs, smells that didn't belong, the taste of coffee when no one was making coffee, the smell of gunpowder when no one had guns. The Quinault elder came by today, Joseph Redhawk, said this land is cursed, said something called Backwest hunts here, feeds on families, generation after generation, told us to leave, but the company won't let us. Too much money in these trees. My hands were steady as I read. Steady like they belonged to someone else. Someone who wasn't afraid. It took Bill last night. Found his clothes by the river, but no body. Just his voice calling from the trees, calling my name. Says it wants Holloway blood. Says it's been waiting. The last entry was dated August 20th, 1923, 5 days before my grandfather disappeared. I understand now. It doesn't just kill, it consumes. Takes everything you are and everything you were. Makes you part of it. I can feel it calling to me, feel my father's voice mixed in with Bill's and the others. This thing has been feeding on my family for generations, and I'm next. If anyone finds this, stay away from Camp Blackwater. The hunger that walks between years is real, and it's always hungry. I closed the journal and looked around the burning camp. The fires were getting bigger now, reaching toward the dark sky. Sparks danced in the air like fireflies. That's when I smelled it. Coffee, strong and bitter the way they made it in logging camps. But I wasn't making coffee. There was no coffee to make. Then I tasted gunpowder, sharp and metallic on my tongue, like licking a bullet. Then I heard the voices, not Tommy or Frank or Pete. Other voices, older voices. My grandfather Thomas, calling from 1923. Marcus, is that you, boy? Men from 1941, talking about planes and battles. Company, fall in! Enemy! Approaching from the tree line. Korean War soldiers from 1951. Medic! We need a medic! All of them calling to me, all of them hungry. I sat down by the fire and waited. The journal in my lap, my friends burning on their pyres, the voices getting louder and closer. I know what you want, I said to the darkness. You want the last Holloway. You want to finish what you started. The fire crackled and popped. Somewhere in the trees, something large was moving. Something that had been walking between years for a very long time. I wasn't afraid. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. Maybe because fear was for the living, and I was starting to understand that I might not be living anymore. 1 week before I sat alone with the burning camp, we were still alive. All 4 of us. Tommy, Frank, Pete and me. We thought we were just logging crew, cutting trees for good money. We had no idea we were walking into a trap that had been set 40 years ago. It started with Tommy acting strange. We were sitting around the campfire after dinner playing cards like we did every night. Tommy was winning, which was normal. He was good with numbers, but then he stopped mid-game and looked up at the trees. Grandfather, he said. His voice sounded different, older somehow. Is that you, grandfather? What are you talking about? Frank asked. He was shuffling the cards, not really paying attention. Your grandfather's been dead for 20 years. No, Tommy said. He stood up slowly, still looking at the trees. Not my grandfather. My great-grandfather. The one who died here in 1923. That got our attention. Pete put down his cards and stared at Tommy. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Tommy, I said carefully, your great-grandfather didn't die here. He moved to California. Remember, you told us that story. Tommy turned to look at me, and his eyes were wrong. Still brown, still Tommy's eyes. But there was someone else looking out through them. Thomas Reeves, he said in a voice that wasn't quite his own. Logging crew number 7. Died August 20th, 1923. Right here where you're sitting. The fire popped, and we all jumped. Frank laughed nervously. Come on, Tommy, you're freaking us out. But Tommy wasn't listening to Frank. He was listening to something else. Something in the trees that we couldn't hear. He says, the hunger is back, Tommy said. Says it's been waiting for the right time. The right people. What hunger? Pete asked. Pete was always the nervous one, jumping at shadows. But his voice was steady now. Too steady. Tommy walked to the edge of the firelight. Just stood there, looking into the darkness. The thing that walks between years, he said. The thing that took Thomas Holloway's crew. It feeds every 40 years. Always the same families. always the same blood. That's when I felt it, like ice water in my veins. Because Tommy was right about one thing. Thomas Holloway was my grandfather. And he did disappear in 1923. "Tommy, come back to the fire," I said. "You're scaring me." He turned around, and when he smiled, it wasn't Tommy's smile. It was someone else's. Someone who had been dead for 40 years. "Don't be scared, Marcus," he said. "We've been waiting for you, all of us." Then Frank started talking about Korea. "Incoming!" he shouted, diving away from the fire. He rolled on the ground, covering his head with his hands. "Mortars, take cover!" But Frank had never been to Korea. He was too young for that war. He'd told us stories about his father fighting there, but Frank had never left Oregon. "Frank," I called. "Frank, you're at camp. There are no mortars." He looked up at me from the dirt, his eyes wild with fear. "Seoul is burning," he whispered. "The Chinese are coming. We have to hold the line." His hands were shaking as he reached for a rifle that wasn't there. His voice was different too, older, with a slight accent I'd never heard before. "Private Morrison reporting for duty," he said, saluting me. "Ready to die for my country, sir." That's when Pete started screaming, not yelling or shouting, screaming like something was tearing him apart from the inside. He fell to his knees by the fire, holding his head in his hands. "Too many voices," he cried. "Too many people inside my head." I ran to him, tried to help him up, but when I touched his shoulder, I felt it too, like electricity, but cold, like touching something that had been dead for a long time. "Pete, what's happening?" He looked up at me, and I saw that his eyes had changed color. They were gray now instead of blue, gray like storm clouds. "I can see them all," he whispered. "Everyone who died here. 1923, 1941, 1951, 1963. They're all here, Marcus. They're all still here." His voice was getting higher, more panicked. "There's a logger named Bill from 1923. He's been waiting so long. And soldiers from the Pacific. They died on islands that don't exist anymore. And Korean war boys who never made it home." Pete grabbed my arm with hands that felt too cold. "They're hungry, Marcus, so hungry. And there's something else, something bigger. Something that's been feeding on them all these years." That's when I saw it. Moving between the trees, just at the edge of the firelight. Tall as a man, but wrong somehow. Too thin, too bent. It moved like it was walking through water, slow and smooth. But the worst part was its face. It had faces, different faces layered on top of each other like photographs. I saw my grandfather Thomas. I saw Tommy's great-grandfather. I saw soldiers in old uniforms and men in logging gear, all of them staring at me with hungry eyes. "The Holloway boy," it said in a voice made of many voices. "We've been waiting." Tommy was walking toward it now, his movements jerky like a puppet on strings. "Yes, grandfather," he said. "I understand now. The debt must be paid." Frank was still on the ground, talking to ghosts from a war he'd never fought. "Tell my mother. I died brave," he whispered. "Tell her Seoul is safe." Pete was rocking back and forth, his grey eyes, seeing things that weren't there, or maybe things that were always there, just waiting for someone sensitive enough to see them. "It's not just hungry for food," Pete said, his voice barely audible. "It's hungry for time, for memories, for everything we are." The thing in the trees stepped closer. In the firelight I could see it clearly now. It wore pieces of everyone it had ever consumed. Grandfather's flannel shirt, a Korean war helmet, logging boots from 1923. 40 years, it said in my grandfather's voice. 40 years I've been saving room for you, Marcus. I should have run. Should have grabbed the others and gotten out of there. But my feet wouldn't move. It was like the ground was holding me in place. "The Holloway debt," the thing continued, "generation after generation. Your great-great-grandfather built his house on sacred ground. The Kino warned him, but he wouldn't listen. It smiled with a dozen different mouths, so now his family feeds the hunger forever." That's when Tommy stepped into the creature's arms, just walked right up to it like he was hugging an old friend. "Take me first," he said in his great-grandfather's voice. "I've been waiting the longest." The thing embraced Tommy, and I watched my friend disappear. Not all at once, piece by piece, like he was dissolving. His face became part of the creature's face. His voice joined the chorus of voices. Frank went next, charging at the thing with an invisible rifle, shouting battle cries from a war that ended before he was born. "For Korea," he yelled as the creature wrapped him up. "For freedom." Then Pete, who walked toward it with tears streaming down his gray eyes. "I can see what you really are," he whispered. "You're not evil. You're just hungry. You've been hungry for so long." And then it was just me and the thing that had once been my grandfather and Tommy and Frank and Pete and dozens of others. "Your turn, Marcus," it said in all their voices at once. "Time to come home." I closed my eyes and stepped forward. The last thing I remember was feeling very tired and very cold, and thinking that maybe being hungry for 40 years would be worse than being dead. I was wrong about that. 2 weeks before we died, I started noticing things, small things at first, the kind of things you might ignore if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention because something felt wrong from the moment we arrived at Camp Blackwater. It started with the coffee. Every morning when I woke up, I could smell coffee brewing. Strong, bitter coffee, like my grandfather used to make when I was little. The problem was, none of us drank coffee. Tommy had tea. Frank drank energy drinks. Pete didn't drink anything but water in the mornings. "Do you guys smell that?" I asked on our 3rd day there. "Smell what?" Tommy was lacing up his boots, getting ready for another day of cutting trees. "Coffee. Someone's making coffee." Frank looked around our camp. "Nobody's making coffee, Marcus. We don't even have a coffee pot." But I could smell it anyway. Rich and dark, with a hint of something else, something that reminded me of old places, old times. Then there were the sounds. Late at night, when everyone else was sleeping, I'd hear voices. Quiet voices, like people talking around a campfire far away. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm was familiar, like the stories my grandfather used to tell. The 3rd night, I got up to investigate. I followed the voices deeper into the woods, past where we were cutting during the day. The moon was bright enough to see by, and the forest felt different at night. Older somehow. I found a clearing I'd never seen before, a perfect circle where no trees grew. In the center was a ring of stones blackened by old fires. The voices were coming from there. But there was nobody in the clearing. I walked to the center and knelt by the fire ring. The stones were still warm, like someone had been using them recently. I could smell that coffee again, stronger now, and something else, something like meat cooking. That's when I heard my name. Marcus, clear as day, coming from the trees around the clearing, a voice I recognized but couldn't place. Marcus Holloway. I stood up fast, looking around. "Who's there?" "You know who." The voice was closer now, right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there except trees and shadows. "Grandfather." The word came out before I could stop it. "Been waiting for you, boy. 40 years I've been waiting." I felt cold all over. My grandfather had been dead for 20 years. Died in a nursing home in Portland, nowhere near these woods. "You're not real," I said out loud. "You're just in my head." Laughter came from all around the clearing. Not mean laughter, sad laughter. "Real enough," the voice said. "Real as hunger, real as time." I ran back to camp that night. Didn't sleep until the sun came up. But the next day, things got worse. We were working on a section of old-growth pine when Pete stopped cutting and looked around. "Does anyone else hear that?" he asked. We all stopped to listen. Birds singing, wind in the trees, normal forest sounds. "Hear what?" Frank asked. "Machinery, like old logging equipment. Sounds like it's coming from over there." Pete pointed deeper. "Into the woods. There's no machinery out there," Tommy said. "Haven't been loggers in this area for decades." But Pete was right. Now that he mentioned it, I could hear it too. The distant sound of chainsaws and truck engines, men shouting to each other over the noise. "Let's check it out," I said. We followed. The sound for about half a mile. It got louder as we walked, but we never found the source. The trees got older as we went deeper, bigger. Some of them had to be hundreds of years old. That's when Frank stopped walking. "I've been here before," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Tommy asked. "We all got here at the same time." Frank was, looking around like he was remembering something. His face was pale. "No, not recently, a long time ago, during the war." "Frank, you were never in a war," Pete said gently. "You're 26 years old." "Korea," Frank whispered. "Hill 255. We held that position for 3 days, lost half the company." He was staring at a group of tall pines like they meant something to him. "Private Morrison got hit by shrapnel right there," he said, pointing. "Died calling for his mother." Frank's voice was different, older, like he was remembering someone else's memories. "Frank, you're scaring me," Tommy said, but Frank wasn't listening. He was walking toward the trees, moving like he was in a trance. "The Chinese came at dawn," he said. "Hundreds of them. We didn't have enough ammunition." I grabbed his arm. "Frank, stop. We're in Oregon, not Korea." He looked at me, and for a second his eyes were confused, like he didn't know where he was. "Marcus," he said in his normal voice, "what are we doing here?" "Looking for that machinery," Pete heard. Frank blinked a few times, then shook his head. "I don't hear any machinery," he said. "It's quiet out here." And he was right. The sounds had stopped. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind, no insects, nothing. We walked back to camp without talking much, but I could tell we were all thinking the same thing. Something was wrong with these woods. That night, Tommy started talking in his sleep. I was lying in my sleeping bag, trying not to think about Frank's strange behavior, when I heard Tommy's voice from the tent next to mine. "Yes, grandfather," he was saying, "I understand. The time is coming." At first I thought he was having a normal dream about his grandfather, but then he started speaking in a language I didn't recognize, not Spanish or French or anything I'd heard before. Something older. "Tommy," I called softly. "Tommy, wake up." But he kept talking in that strange language. His voice was getting deeper, more serious, like an old man's voice. I got up and unzipped his tent. Tommy was sitting up in his sleeping bag, his eyes wide open. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at something behind me. "He's here," Tommy said in his normal voice. "He's been waiting so long." I turned around to look, but there was nothing there except darkness. "Who's here, Tommy?" "Thomas Reeves, my great-grandfather. He says the hunger is waking up. Says it's almost time to feed." Tommy's eyes focused on me, and I could see he was awake now, really awake. "Marcus, I had the strangest dream. There was this old man, looked just like the pictures of my great-grandfather. He was trying to tell me something important." "What was he trying to tell you?" Tommy thought for a moment. "That we're not just here to cut trees. We're here for another reason, something to do with your family." A chill went down my spine. "My family?" He said the Holloways have a debt to pay, said it's been waiting 40 years to collect. I crawled into Tommy's tent and sat next to him. Outside, the forest was still too quiet. "Tommy, my grandfather disappeared near here in 1923. His whole logging crew vanished." Tommy nodded like this made perfect sense. "That's what Thomas said. Said your grandfather is still here, still waiting." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the nothing outside. "Marcus," Tommy said finally, "I think we should leave, pack up tomorrow and go home." "Yeah," I agreed. Something's not right about this place. But even as I said it, I knew we wouldn't leave. Something was keeping us. Here, something that had been waiting 40 years for the right moment, something that was getting hungrier every day. The next morning, Pete found footprints around our camp. Big footprints. bigger than any of ours. They circled our tents like someone had been watching us sleep. Could be a bear, Frank suggested, but his voice wasn't convinced. The prints didn't look like bear prints. They looked like human prints, but wrong somehow. Too long, with marks that might have been claws. Whatever it was here for a long time, Pete said. He was following the trail with his eyes. Look, the prints go around and around like... It was pacing. The footprints led away from camp and into the deep woods, toward the clearing where I'd heard my grandfather's voice. Should we follow them? Tommy asked. No, I said quickly. We should pack up and leave right now. But I knew it was too late for that. Whatever was hunting us had been patient for 40 years. It could wait a little longer. It was already inside our heads, making us hear things, see things, remember. Things that never happened to us. All it had to do now was wait for us to walk into its arms, and deep down, I knew we would. 3 weeks before everything went wrong, I drove up the mountain road to Camp Blackwater for the first time. I was excited. It had been months since I'd had steady work, and the logging company was paying well. Good money for a summer of cutting trees in the wilderness. What could go wrong? The road was narrow and winding, cut through old forest that seemed to go on forever. I'd been driving for 2 hours when I saw the sign, Camp Blackwater, 5 miles. Someone had painted over the original sign with red paint. Underneath, I could just make out older words. Site of 1923 tragedy. That should have been my first warning. The camp was smaller than I expected. 4 wooden cabins around a central fire pit, with a supply shed and an outhouse at the edge of the clearing. Everything looked new, like it had been built recently, but there was something about the place that felt old, really old. A man was waiting for me by the fire pit, tall and thin, with graying hair and kind eyes. He waved as I parked my truck. "You must be Marcus," he said, walking over with his hand out. "I'm Joseph Redhawk. I work for the logging company sometimes, helping new crews get settled." We shook hands. His grip was firm, but his skin was cold despite the warm afternoon. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Redhawk. The other guys here yet?" "They arrived this morning. Good men, all of them. You'll like them." Joseph led me toward the cabins, but he stopped halfway there and turned to look at me. "Marcus Holloway," he said slowly. "That's an interesting name. My grandfather was Thomas Holloway. He worked in logging too back in the day." Joseph's face changed. His kind expression became worried, almost scared. "Thomas Holloway worked near here, didn't he? In 1923? "Yeah." "How did you know that?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment, looking around the camp like he was seeing it for the first time. "Mr. Holloway, I need to tell you something important. This place has a history. A bad history." "What kind of history?" 40 years ago, a logging crew disappeared from this exact spot. Before that, another crew in 1923. Your grandfather's crew. I felt something cold move through my chest. My grandfather died in a nursing home in Portland. He didn't disappear. Joseph shook his head. "Your grandfather came home from these woods, but he wasn't the same man. My grandmother told me stories, said Thomas Holloway came back speaking languages he'd never learned, said he knew things about dead people, said he was carrying something inside him." "What kind of something?" "Hunger," Joseph said simply. "The kind of hunger that never gets satisfied." Before I could ask what he meant, voices came from one of the cabins, men laughing and talking, normal sounds that made me feel better. "Come on," Joseph said. "Let me introduce you to your crew." The first man I met was Tommy Reeves, short and stocky, with brown hair and an easy smile. He was about my age, maybe a little younger. "Marcus, good to finally meet you. I'm Tommy. This is going to be a great summer, man. Good work, good pay, and look at this place. It's like paradise." Tommy's enthusiasm was infectious. I started to forget about Joseph's strange warning. The second man was Frank Morrison. Older than Tommy and me, maybe 35. He had the quiet, careful way of moving that some veterans have. When we shook hands, I noticed a tattoo on his forearm, Korean letters. Served in Korea? I asked. Frank looked confused. Korea? No, man. I was never in the military. Got this tattoo in Portland. Thought it looked cool. What does it say? Honestly? I have no idea. The tattoo guy said it meant strength, but who knows? That was odd, but not worth worrying about. The third man was Pete Gallagher, thin and nervous, with light blue eyes that seemed to see too much. He was the youngest of us, maybe 22. When I shook his hand, he held on a little too long. You feel it too, don't you? He said quietly. Feel what? This place, it's heavy, like there are too many people here, even though it's just us. Tommy laughed. Pete's always been sensitive to stuff like that. Don't worry about him, Marcus. He'll get used to it. But Pete wasn't laughing. He was looking at me seriously. Marcus, what's your last name? Holloway. Pete's face went pale. Holloway. Like the logging family? Yeah, my grandfather worked in these woods back in the 20s. Pete let go of my hand and stepped back. We should leave, he said quietly. All of us, right now. Pete, come on, Frank said. We just got here. No, I'm serious. Something bad happened here. Something that's not finished yet. Joseph Redhawk was watching this conversation from across the camp. When our eyes met, he nodded slightly, like Pete had just confirmed something he already knew. Pete, I said gently, it's just a job. We cut trees, we get paid, we go home. Nothing bad is going to happen. Pete looked at me for a long moment, then shrugged. Maybe. You're right. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. But I could tell he didn't believe it. That evening we sat around the fire pit and got to know each other. Tommy told jokes and stories about other logging jobs. Frank talked about his hometown in eastern Oregon. Pete mostly listened, but every now and then he'd look over his shoulder at the trees, like he heard something. Joseph joined us for dinner. He cooked fish over the fire, and it was the best meal I'd had in months. Mr. Redhawk, I said, you mentioned something earlier about this place having a bad history. Can you tell us more about that? Joseph poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the dark sky. My people, the Kino, we have stories about these woods, old stories. There's something here that my grandmother called Bakwes. It walks between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Like a ghost, Tommy asked. Not exactly. More like hunger given form. It feeds on families, generation after generation, takes them one by one until the bloodline ends. Frank laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Mr. Redhawk. You don't really believe in stuff like that. Joseph looked at Frank seriously. I believe what my grandmother told me and what her grandmother told her. This thing, this Bakwes, it doesn't just kill. It consumes, takes everything you are and adds it to what it is. Why are you telling us this? Pete asked. Because, Joseph said, looking directly at me, it feeds every 40 years. And it's been exactly 40 years since the last crew disappeared. The fire crackled and popped. Somewhere in the trees an owl hooted. Normal forest sounds, but they seemed louder now, more important. So what are you saying? Tommy asked. That we're in danger? I'm saying you should be careful. Watch out for each other, and if things start to seem wrong, don't ignore it. Joseph stood up and brushed off his pants. I should head back to town. You boys take care of yourselves. Wait, I called after him. Is there anything else we should know? Joseph stopped at the edge of the firelight and turned back. If you start hearing voices that aren't there, or remembering things that never happened to you, or speaking languages you never learned, leave, pack up and leave immediately. And if we don't, Joseph's face was sad in the flickering light, then you'll join the others, and in 40 years it'll be hungry again. After he left, we sat around the fire in silence for a while. Finally, Tommy spoke up. Well, that was cheerful. Frank laughed. Just local superstition. Every old place has ghost stories. Maybe, Pete said quietly. But what if it's not? I looked around at my new friends. Good men, all of them, men who trusted me to lead this crew safely through the summer. It doesn't matter, I said. We're here to do a job. We'll do it and go home. Nothing's going to happen to us. But even as I said it, I could smell something strange on the wind. Something like old coffee and older hunger. And when I looked at the trees surrounding our little camp, I could swear I saw faces in the shadows. Faces that looked familiar, even though I'd never seen them before. Faces that looked hungry. That was our first night at Camp Blackwater, our last normal night. By morning, the hunting would begin. My name is Sister Mary Catherine, and I used to believe in God with all my heart. Used to. That was before I spent 45 years praying for miracles that never came, watching children suffer while I whispered empty words into the darkness. I remember the exact moment my faith cracked. It was a Tuesday morning in the hospital chapel where I worked. Little Emma Martinez, only 7 years old, was dying of cancer. Her mother held my hand so tight it hurt, begging me to pray harder. "Please, sister," she cried. "God will listen to you," I prayed. Oh, how I prayed. I used every prayer I'd learned in 23 years as a Franciscan nun. I begged God. I bargained with him. I even got angry at him. Emma died that Thursday. After the funeral, I locked myself in my room and screamed at the crucifix on my wall. "Where were you?" I shouted until my throat was raw. The wooden Jesus just stared back with painted eyes that suddenly looked fake to me. That's when I knew I needed to get away. Far away from the convent, from other nuns who still believed, from the endless cycle of prayer and disappointment. When the fire department offered me a summer job watching for forest fires from a tower in Oregon, I jumped at it. "It's perfect for thinking," the supervisor told me over the phone. "Nothing but you, the forest, and silence. Silence. That's exactly what I needed." The tower stood 90 feet tall in the Cascade Mountains, surrounded by pine trees so thick they blocked out most of the sky. It was a metal skeleton with a small cabin at the top, just big enough for a bed, radio, and the fire-spotting equipment. On my first night, as I climbed the endless stairs with my suitcase, something felt wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but different, like the forest was watching me. The trees seemed to lean in closer as darkness fell, and I kept hearing sounds that didn't quite make sense. Footsteps too heavy to be a deer. Branches breaking in places where no wind was blowing. Just nerves, I told myself, but my hands shook as I locked the cabin door. The local ranger, Kevin Walsh, had warned me about the previous tower watchman. "Tom Bradley," he said, scratching his beard. "Nice guy, but he just vanished one day, left everything behind. Food, clothes, even his wallet. Search teams never found a trace." "What do you think happened?" I asked. Kevin shrugged, but his eyes looked worried. "Could be anything out here. Bears, maybe he fell and got hurt. The forest can be strange sometimes." Strange. That was the word everyone used when they talked about this place. My second night in the tower, I met Terry Hoffman, the supply pilot who brought groceries and mail once a week. He was a tough guy with calloused hands and a nervous laugh, but something about him seemed scared. "You need anything extra?" he asked, unloading. "Boxes at the base of my tower. I mean anything that might help you. Stay safe up there." "Safe from what?" Terry looked around at the trees like they might be listening. "Things happen here, sister. My planes had engine trouble 3 times flying over this forest. 3 times, and I've been flying for 20 years without a single problem anywhere else." As he walked back to his plane, I noticed he kept looking over his shoulder at the dark spaces between the trees. That night, alone in my tiny cabin, with just a kerosene lamp for light, I tried to pray. The words that used to flow like water now stuck in my throat. Instead of feeling connected to God, I felt completely alone, floating 90 feet above a forest that seemed to breathe in the darkness below me. But here's the thing that scared me most. Part of me liked the silence. Part of me was relieved not to pretend anymore that I believed someone was listening. I was wrong about the silence, though. Something was listening. Something had been waiting for me to arrive. I just didn't know it yet. My third night in the tower changed everything. I woke up at 2 a.m. to a sound I'd never heard before. It was like someone humming, but deeper than any human voice. The sound came from somewhere in the dark forest below, floating up through my open window like smoke. I grabbed my flashlight and leaned out to look down. The beam barely reached the ground through all those pine branches, but I could see something moving between the trees. Something big. My heart started beating fast. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is someone down there?" The humming stopped. Everything went dead quiet, like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I heard footsteps. Not running footsteps, but slow, careful ones. Whatever was down there was walking in circles around my tower, and with each step I could feel the metal shake just a little bit. I locked my door and sat on my bed with the radio in my hands, ready to call for help. But who would I call? Kevin lived 20 miles away. By the time anyone got here, whatever was down there would be long gone. The footsteps stopped right under my tower. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Nothing. Just when I thought it was over, something hit the side of my tower, not hard but firm, like someone testing how strong it was. Then it happened again on the other side, then the back. Whatever was down there was smart. It was checking my tower like it was deciding something. I stayed awake until sunrise, but I never heard it leave. When Kevin came by the next afternoon to check on me, I told him what happened. He listened with his arms crossed, nodding slowly. "Could have been a bear," he said, but he didn't sound sure. "Do bears hum?" Kevin was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Sister, can I tell you something? Tom Bradley, the guy who used to work here, before he disappeared, he told me some strange stories. Said he felt like something was watching him, said he could sense it thinking. Thinking? Yeah, like it was studying him. That word made my skin crawl. Studying. 2 days later, Terry came with my supplies. As soon as he got out of his plane, I could see something was wrong. His face was pale and his hands shook as he unloaded the boxes. "Had more engine trouble?" I asked. Terry stopped and looked at me. "Sister, I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy. Try me." He glanced around at the trees. "Each time my engine died, it happened right over this forest. And each time I swear I saw something on the ground looking up at me. Something tall and dark, just standing. There watching. Did you tell anyone? Who would believe me?" Terry shook his head. "But here's the weird part. Each time it happened, my engine came back on just before I would have crashed. Like whatever's down there didn't want me to get hurt. It just wanted me to, I don't know, notice it. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, looking out at the dark forest, thinking about what Terry said, something that didn't want to hurt, just wanted to be noticed. Around midnight, I heard the humming again. This time, I didn't hide. I opened my window all the way and listened. The sound was beautiful in a strange way, like a lullaby my mother might have sung if she could sing as deep as the ocean. "I know you're there," I whispered into the darkness. The humming stopped. Then, in the silence, I heard something that made my heart stop. A voice, deep and gentle, speaking words I felt more than heard, "not afraid." I blinked. Had I imagined it? "You? Not afraid." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like it was inside my head and all around me at the same time. "Should I be afraid?" I whispered back. For a long moment, nothing. Then others, "Afraid. You. Different." I gripped the window frame. "What do you want?" "To understand. You pray, but not believe. Why?" My mouth went dry. This thing, whatever it was, had been listening to me, watching me pray my empty prayers, seeing through my fake faith. "I don't know if God exists anymore," I heard myself say. "God, here, always here. You, not looking right place." Before I could ask what that meant, I heard those slow footsteps again, but this time they were walking away, getting quieter and quieter until the forest swallowed them completely. I sat by that window until morning, my mind spinning. Something was out there, something that could speak, that could think, that knew I was losing my faith, and somehow that scared me less than it should have. The next morning, Kevin didn't show up for his regular check-in. He was supposed to come by every other day, but when afternoon came and went with no sign of his truck, I started to worry. I tried calling him on the radio, nothing but static. That evening, as the sun was setting, I heard his voice calling from somewhere in the forest below. "Sister Catherine, help me!" I grabbed my flashlight and leaned out the window. "Kevin, where are you?" "I'm lost. I can't find my way back to the truck." His voice sounded strange, like it was coming from all directions at once. I couldn't pinpoint where he was. "Keep talking," I shouted. "I'll try to guide you." But then Kevin's voice started saying things that didn't make sense. "The trees are moving, sister. They're showing me things, beautiful things." A chill ran down my spine. Kevin was a practical man. He didn't talk about beautiful things. "Kevin, stay where you are. I'm coming down." I climbed down the tower as fast as I could, my flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness. When I reached the bottom, I could still hear his voice, but now it sounded happy, too happy. "I understand now," Kevin called out. "It's not scary at all. It's wonderful." "Kevin," I ran toward his voice, pushing through the thick pine branches. "Where are you?" Then the voice stopped, complete silence. I searched for 2 hours, calling his name until my throat was raw. I found his truck parked on the forest road, keys still in it, engine cold. But no Kevin. The next morning, I called the ranger station. They sent a search team, but they found nothing, no footprints, no torn clothes, nothing. It was like Kevin had just vanished into thin air, same as Tom Bradley. But I knew better. Something had taken him. The same something that had been watching me. That night I was too scared to sleep. I sat by my window with the radio in my lap, jumping at every sound. Around midnight I heard the humming again, but this time it sounded sad. "Did you take Kevin?" I whispered into the darkness. The humming stopped. He wanted to see, wanted to understand. "Where is he?" "Safe, happy, free from worry. I want to see him. Not ready, not yet." I felt tears on my cheeks. Will I ever see him again? When you understand, when you stop fighting. Fighting what? But there was no answer, just the wind in the trees. 3 days later, my best friend Rachel drove up from Portland. I had called her after Kevin disappeared, and she dropped everything to come check on me. Rachel was the only person who knew about my crisis of faith. She was the only one I could talk to honestly. "You look terrible," she said, climbing up to my tower with a bag of groceries and a thermos of coffee. "I haven't been sleeping well." Rachel studied my face. "Mary Catherine, what's really going on here? You sounded scared on the phone." I told her everything, the sounds, the voice, Kevin's disappearance. I expected her to tell me I was losing my mind, but she just listened quietly, nodding sometimes. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Do you think it's dangerous?" "I don't know. It says it doesn't want to hurt me. But Kevin, maybe Kevin's okay. Maybe he found something here that made him want to stay." I stared at her. "Rachel, people don't just disappear because they find something beautiful." She smiled sadly. "Don't they? How many people have walked away from their old lives when they found something that made them truly happy?" That night, Rachel slept on the floor while I took the bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to find her standing by the window, looking out at the forest. "Rachel?" She turned to me, and her face looked different, peaceful. "It's here," she whispered. I got up and looked out the window. Far below, between the trees, I could see a shape moving in the moonlight. It was tall, much taller than a person, and it moved like it was floating instead of walking. Can you see it? Rachel asked. Yes. She sees, came the voice in my head. She believes. What does it want? Rachel whispered. To show you truth about prayer, about God, about everything. I felt Rachel's hand take mine. Her skin was warm, but she was trembling. Are you afraid? I asked her. She shook her head. No, I feel called, like this is why I came here. The shape below us stopped moving and looked up at our window. Even from that distance, I could feel its eyes on us. Ancient eyes, kind eyes. Tomorrow, the voice said, tomorrow you will understand. The next morning, Rachel was gone. I found her shoes by the base of the tower and her jacket hanging on a tree branch. But Rachel herself had vanished, just like Kevin and Tom. I climbed back up to my tower and sat on my bed, holding her jacket, crying. 3 people had disappeared from this forest, and I was next. I knew it. But the strange thing was I wasn't as scared as I should have been. Part of me wanted to know what they had found. Part of me wanted to understand what was so beautiful that it made people walk away from everything they knew. That night, I made a decision. Instead of hiding in my tower, I would go down and face whatever was waiting for me in the forest. I would find out what happened to my friends, and maybe I would find out what God really looked like. I waited until midnight, then climbed down from my tower with just a flashlight and my rosary. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I needed answers. The forest was different at night, quieter but also more alive somehow. Every step I took on the pine needles sounded too loud. Every shadow looked like it might be hiding something. I'm here, I called out softly. I'm ready to understand. For a few minutes, nothing. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow and careful. I turned around, and my flashlight beam caught something that made my breath stop. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, covered in dark fur that looked almost black in the moonlight. But its eyes were gentle, human-like, but older, much older. Don't be afraid, it said. And this time I heard the voice with my ears, not just in my head. The voice was deep but soft, like a grandfather talking to a scared child. What are you? I whispered. I am a guardian. I have watched over this forest for longer than your people have walked on this earth. I took a step back, but not because I was scared. I was amazed. You're real. As real as your pain. As real as your questions about God. My knees felt weak. I sat down on a fallen log, still staring at this impossible creature. Kevin and Rachel, are they? They are safe. They chose to see what lies beyond the world you know. They are learning things that cannot be taught with words. Can I see them? The guardian moved closer, and I could smell the forest on him. A pine and earth and something clean like mountain air. First, you must choose. You came here running from God because you could not understand why he allows suffering. But you have been looking for God in the wrong places. What do you mean? He gestured to the trees around us. Your people built walls around God, put him in buildings, in books, in rules. But God was never in those places. God is here, in the breathing of the forest, in the love that connects all living things, in the wisdom that grows slowly like trees. I felt something stir in my chest. But the prayers, the children who died, did your prayers change nothing? Or did they change you? Did the love you gave those children mean nothing because they died anyway? Tears started flowing down my face. I don't know anymore. The boy who died in your arms last year, do you remember his name? Michael, I whispered. Michael Torres. And the girl who had no visitors except you. Sarah Kim. You stayed with them. You held their hands. You made their last days less frightening. Was that not an answer to prayer? I was crying harder now. But they still died. Everything dies, Mary Catherine. But love doesn't die. The love you gave them lives on. It changed their families. It changed the other children who saw your kindness. It changed you. The guardian knelt down in front of me, and even kneeling, he was almost as tall as I was sitting. His eyes were so kind I could barely look at them. God never promised to stop all suffering. God promised to be with you in the suffering. And God was there every time you held a dying child, every time you prayed even when you didn't believe, every time you chose love even when it hurt. Then why did I lose my faith? You didn't lose your faith. You lost your expectations. Your faith is why you're here now, talking to me instead of running away. Your faith is why you came down from that tower to find the truth. I looked around at the dark forest. Suddenly, it didn't seem scary anymore. It seemed holy, like a church made of trees instead of stone. What happens now? I asked. Now you choose. You can go back to your old life, but you will see it differently. You will know that God is everywhere, not just in the places your church says to look. Or what? Or you can stay here and help me protect this sacred place. Help me teach others what you are learning tonight. Help bridge the gap between your people and the ancient wisdom of this earth. I thought about the convent, about the other nuns who still prayed their simple prayers. I thought about the hospital, about all the people who needed comfort. If I stay, can I still help people? You will help more people than you ever imagined, but in a different way. You will teach them to find God in the forest, in each other, in themselves. You will show them that everything is connected. I stood up and looked at this incredible being who had shattered everything I thought I knew about God and faith and prayer. What about Kevin and Rachel? What did they choose? They chose to learn, to grow beyond what they were. Kevin guards the southern mountains now. Rachel teaches the spirits of the rivers. They are more themselves than they ever were before. Will I still be me? The guardian smiled, and when he smiled, he looked less like a monster and more like an angel. You will be more yourself than you have ever been. You will be Mary Catherine, but also something greater, a bridge between worlds, a teacher of the old truths that your people have forgotten. I closed my eyes and felt the forest around me. I could sense the life in every tree, every animal, every blade of grass. I could feel the connections between all things, like invisible threads of light. For the first time in months, I prayed. But this prayer was different. It wasn't asking for anything or complaining about anything. It was just grateful. Grateful to be alive, to be here, to finally understand. When I opened my eyes, the guardian was watching me with those ancient, kind eyes. I choose to stay, I said. And in that moment, everything changed. The change didn't happen all at once, like in the movies. It was more like waking up slowly from a deep sleep. First, I could hear things I'd never heard before. The whispers of the trees talking to each other, the heartbeat of the earth under my feet, the songs that birds sang to their babies in the dark. Is this what it's like for you? I asked the guardian. This is what it's like to be truly awake, he said. Your people sleep through most of life. They miss the real conversations happening all around them. I looked back at my tower, standing tall and metal against the stars. What about my job? People will come looking for me. They will find a note explaining that you've decided to stay in the forest as a researcher. They will think you've gone a little crazy from being alone too long, but they'll understand. People disappear into the wilderness all the time. He was right. I could already imagine what people would say. Poor Sister Mary Catherine, she finally cracked, but I didn't care anymore what they thought. Will I ever see other people again? When they're ready to see you, some will come here searching for answers, just like you did. You'll help them find what they're looking for. Over the next few days, I learned things that would have seemed impossible before. I learned that every tree in the forest was connected underground by roots that shared messages. I learned that animals could sense human emotions from miles away. I learned that there were places in the forest where time moved differently, where you could sit for what felt like hours, but only minutes would pass in the outside world. The guardian taught me how to listen with more than just my ears, how to feel the pain of a sick tree and help heal it, how to comfort lost animals and guide them home, how to sense when people were coming to the forest with good hearts versus those who came to harm it. You're becoming a bridge, he told me. One evening as we sat by a stream that glowed with tiny lights, between your old world and this one, between the God your people think they know and the God that actually is. What about other guardians? Are there others like you? He nodded. All over the world, in mountains, in deserts, in the deep ocean. We've been waiting for humans to remember how to listen. Most of your people forgot long ago, but some are starting to remember. Because of people like me. Because of people like you who are willing to let go of what they thought they knew and learn what's really true. A month passed, though time felt different now. Sometimes I would climb back up to my tower and use the radio to report that all was well, that no fires had been spotted. My voice sounded normal, but inside I was completely changed. One morning, I heard a car coming up the forest road. A young man got out, maybe 25 years old, with tired eyes and slumped shoulders. He looked up at my tower with the same expression I probably had when I first arrived, lost and desperate. I climbed down to meet him. "Are you the fire watcher?" he asked. "I am. I'm Mary Catherine. What brings you out here?" He ran his hands through his hair. "I know this sounds crazy, but I keep having dreams about this forest, dreams that feel more real than my actual life. I'm supposed to be getting married next month, but I can't stop thinking about this place." I smiled. "What's your name?" "David. David Chen." "Well, David, dreams like that usually mean something. Would you like to walk with me for a bit?" "I know. Some beautiful spots where you can think clearly." As we walked deeper into the forest, I could see David's shoulders starting to relax. The tight lines around his eyes began to soften. By the time we reached the clearing where I first met the Guardian, David was walking differently, more slowly, more peacefully. "It's so quiet here," he said, sitting down on the same log where I had cried that first night. "Quiet on the surface," I said, "but if you listen carefully, you'll hear it's actually full of conversations." David closed his eyes and listened. After a few minutes, his eyes snapped open. "Did you hear that? It sounded like singing." "The trees," I said simply. "They're welcoming you." That night, David slept on the floor of my tower. In the morning, he called his fiancée and told her he needed more time to think. He stayed for a week, learning to hear what the forest was teaching him. When he finally left, he was a different person, calmer, happier, more sure of what he really wanted from life. He was the first of many. Over the months that followed, people came. Not many, but enough. A woman who had lost her child and couldn't stop crying. A man who had worked in an office for 30 years and felt dead inside. A teenager who was angry at the world and didn't know why. Some stayed for days, some for hours. All of them left different than they came. Some went back to their old lives, but with new eyes. Others chose to stay longer, learning what I was learning. I never saw the Guardian turn into the creature people expected when they heard stories about Sasquatch. To me, he was always gentle, always wise, always patient. He taught me that the reason people were afraid of him wasn't because he was dangerous, but because he represented something they had forgotten. The wild, connected, sacred part of being. Alive. Sometimes late at night, I would climb to the top of my tower and look out over the forest. I could sense Kevin in the southern mountains, happy and free, protecting hikers who got lost. I could feel Rachel by the rivers, her laughter mixing with the sound of flowing water, and I could feel something else, a network of people all over. The world who were waking up the same way I had. People who were finding God, not in buildings or books, but in the living world around them. People who were remembering that everything is connected, that love is the force that holds it all together. My name is Sister Mary Catherine, and I used to think I had lost my faith. Now I know I just found a bigger God than I ever imagined. a God who speaks through forests and rivers and the kindness between strangers, a God who doesn't promise to take away all pain, but promises to be present in the love we give each other. I'm still a nun, in a way, just not the kind I used to be. I serve in a cathedral made of trees, and my prayers are answered every day in ways I'm finally wise enough to see. The forest is still my home, the guardian is still my teacher, and people still come when they're ready to hear what we have to share. Some call me crazy, others call me blessed. I just call myself awake. My name is Rebecca Thorne, and I'm a doctor who helps kids with their feelings. Not the kind of doctor who gives you shots, but the kind who talks to children when they're scared or sad. I've been doing this job for 7 years now, ever since I was 22. I love helping kids because I know what it's like to be hurt and scared when you're little. The snow was falling hard when I drove up the mountain road to Camp Wildwood. My car was sliding a bit, and I had to grip the steering wheel tight. It was only October, but it felt like the middle of winter up here in the Adirondack Mountains. That should have been my first warning that something wasn't right. I was here because of Harrison Webb, a rich man who wanted to build a fancy hotel where the old summer camp used to be. He called me because weird things kept happening at the camp. His workers would show up, but then strange storms would come out of nowhere. Tools would go missing. Some men said they heard children laughing when no kids were around. Mr. Webb thought maybe I could figure out what was scaring his workers away. When I got to the camp, I saw Mr. Webb standing next to a big black car. He was a tall man in an expensive coat, talking loudly on his phone about money and building permits. He looked angry. "Dr. Thorne," he called out when he saw me. "Thank goodness you're here. This place is driving me crazy." I looked around at the old camp. There were about 10 wooden buildings covered in snow. They looked like they hadn't been used in a very long time, but they weren't falling apart like I expected. Everything looked frozen, like time had stopped here. "Tell me what's been happening," I said. Mr. Webb rubbed his face. "My construction crew won't work here anymore. They say it's haunted. Yesterday, we had perfect weather, then suddenly a blizzard came out of nowhere. It was so bad we couldn't see 2 feet in front of us. But here's the weird part. The storm only happened right here at the camp. Down the road, it was sunny." I walked toward the main building. The door was old but not locked. Inside, it smelled like dust and something else, something sad. There were tables and chairs just sitting there, like the kids had just left for lunch and never came back. "When did this place close?" I asked. 1932, Mr. Webb said. "Some kind of accident. A bunch of kids died in a blizzard, but that was almost 30 years ago. It's just an old story." But as soon as he said those words, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath, and frost started forming on the windows. Mr. Webb didn't seem to notice, but I felt something else, like we were being watched. I walked over to one of the tables. There was a drawing left there, made with crayons. It showed stick figures of children holding hands under a big black cloud. At the bottom, someone had written in shaky letters, "We are alone." "Mr. Webb," I said quietly, "I think you should tell me exactly what happened here in 1932. He sighed. "Fine. This was a summer camp for orphans. Kids who didn't have parents. 23 children were here with their counselors. A terrible storm came in December when they were supposed to leave. The road got blocked and they couldn't get food or help. All 23 kids died. As he spoke, I heard something that made my blood turn cold. It was soft at first, then louder. Children crying. Not just one child, but many children. All crying together like their hearts were broken. Mr. Webb kept talking about his building plans, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was listening to those cries, and something deep inside me, the part that remembered being a scared little girl, knew exactly what I was hearing. These weren't just ghost stories. There were children here, children who had been waiting for someone to help them for 26 years, and they were still scared, still alone, still crying for someone to care about them. I looked out the window at the snow that was falling harder now, and I realized I wasn't here to help Mr. Webb with his building project. I was here to help 23 children who had never gotten the chance to heal from the most terrible thing that could happen to a kid: being left all alone when they needed help the most. The crying got louder, and the snow started to swirl. Like a tornado outside the window, Mr. Webb finally noticed and stepped back, his face white with fear. "Dr. Thorne," he whispered, "what's happening?" I put my hand on the cold window and whispered back, "I think the children want to tell us their story." That night I stayed at a small motel down the mountain, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those children crying. It wasn't angry crying or scary crying. It was the kind of crying that comes from being hurt and alone for too long. The next morning, I drove back to the camp by myself. Mr. Webb said he had meetings in town, but I think he was just scared. The snow had stopped, but everything was covered in white. It was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I brought something with me, my bag of toys and art supplies that I use with kids. If there really were children here, maybe they would want to play or draw. That's how I usually start helping scared kids. You don't jump right into the scary stuff. You start slow. I went into the main building and set up at one of the small tables. I put out some crayons, paper, and a few stuffed animals. Then I did something that might sound crazy. I started talking to the empty room like the children were there. "Hi," I said softly. "My name is Rebecca. I'm here to listen if you want to talk." Nothing happened at first, just silence. But then, slowly, one of the crayons started to roll across the table. Not like someone pushed it, but like invisible fingers were touching it. My heart started beating fast, but I tried to stay calm. "That's okay," I said. "You can use the crayons if you want." The crayon stopped moving. Then another one started to roll. Soon, all the crayons were moving around the table, like little kids were playing with them. But I couldn't see anyone. I sat very still and watched. After a few minutes, the crayons spelled out words on the table. "We are cold." "I know you're cold," I said. "Cold and scared and alone. That must be very hard." More crayons moved. No one. "Game." Those 3 words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I work with kids who have been hurt or left behind, and I know that feeling. When you're little and scared, and the adults who are supposed to protect you don't come to help, it breaks something inside you. "I'm here now," I said. "I came." The temperature in the room dropped so fast I could see my breath again. But this time, something else happened. I started to see them. Not clearly, but like shadows that looked like children. They were sitting around the table with me, 23 small shadows. "We waited," a voice whispered. It sounded like many children talking at the same time. "We waited, but they forgot us." "Tell me what happened," I said gently. "I want to understand." The shadows got clearer. I could see their faces now. Thin, sad faces of children who looked about 6 to 12 years old. They were wearing old-fashioned clothes from the 1930s. "The grown-ups said they would come back," one little girl said. "Before winter. They said someone would take us home, but no one came," said a boy with dark hair. "The storm came instead. We were so hungry," another child whispered, "and so cold. We waited by the windows every day, watching for cars on the road." I felt tears in my eyes. These children had been abandoned. The camp was supposed to close before winter, but something went wrong. Maybe the people in charge forgot about them, or maybe they just didn't care because these were orphans, kids nobody wanted. "We tried to take care of each other," a small boy said. "But we were just kids. We didn't know how." "The cold hurt so much," the little girl added. "We all got sick. One by one we fell asleep and couldn't wake up. But we stayed together," they said all at once. "We wouldn't leave each other. We became one, so no one would be alone anymore." Now I understood. These 23 children had died scared and abandoned, and their spirits couldn't move on. Because they were still carrying all that hurt. They had joined together to make one big spirit because they were too afraid to be alone again. We don't want to be forgotten again, they said. When people try to tear down our home, we make the storms. We make them leave. You're not forgotten, I said. I see you, I hear you, and I understand why you're scared. The room got warmer, just a little bit. The children's shadows looked more solid now, more real. Are you going to leave too? They asked. No, I said firmly. I'm going to stay until you don't need me anymore, but I want to help you feel better. Being stuck here, being scared all the time, that's no way for children to live. We're not alive, one boy said sadly. Maybe not, I said, but you're still here and you still have feelings, and feelings can be healed, even after. What happened to you? The children looked at each other with their sad, ghostly faces. How? The little girl asked. The same way I help any scared kid, I said. We talk, we play, we work through the scary feelings together. You've been taking care of each other for so long. Now let me take care of you. For the first time, I saw something new in their faces. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it wasn't just sadness either. It was hope, small and fragile, but real. Will you really stay, they asked. I promise, I said. Outside, I heard a car engine. Mr. Webb was coming back, probably with more construction workers. The children heard it too, and their faces changed. The shadows got darker, and the wind started to howl. It's okay, I said quickly. Let me talk to him. We can figure this out together. But the children were already fading back into shadows, and the temperature was dropping fast. Through the window, I could see storm clouds forming out of nowhere. Please, I called out to them. Trust me. Give me a chance to help. The wind stopped for just a moment. Don't leave us, they whispered, and then they were gone. I sat alone at the little table, surrounded by scattered crayons and the smell of winter. Outside, Mr. Webb's car was getting closer, and I knew things were about to get much more complicated. Mr. Webb came through the door with 3 big men in hard hats and work boots. They were carrying tools and talking loudly about tearing down walls and clearing land. The moment they stepped inside, the air got so cold I could see everyone's breath. What's with the temperature in here? One of the workers asked, rubbing his arms. Old building, Mr. Webb said quickly. Probably just bad heating. Dr. Thorne, did you find anything useful? I looked at him, then at the workers who were already measuring walls and taking pictures. I had to be careful. If I told them about the children right now, they'd think I was crazy. I think we need to talk privately first, I said, but it was too late. One of the workers had moved to the corner where I'd seen the little girl's shadow. His measuring tape suddenly snapped back and hit him in the face. Ow! What the? He looked at his tape measure like it had attacked him. Must be broken, another worker said, but his voice sounded nervous. That's when the wind started. Not outside wind, inside wind. Papers on the tables began to flutter, and the temperature dropped even more. The workers looked around with wide eyes. Okay, this is weird, one of them muttered. I stood up slowly. I could see the children's shadows moving around the room, getting darker and more upset. They didn't like these men being here. Didn't like the talk of tearing things down. Everyone needs to step outside, I said firmly. Right now. What? Why? Mr. Webb demanded, but the children answered for me. Every door in the building slammed shut at the same time. The sound was so loud it made everyone jump. Then all the windows started rattling like someone was shaking them. We're trapped, one worker shouted, running to a door and pulling on the handle. It wouldn't budge. The shadows were everywhere now, moving fast around the room. I could hear the children's voices, all talking at once, scared and angry. They want to hurt our home, they whispered. Make them go away. I can't make them go away if you don't let them leave, I said out loud. The workers stared at me. Who are you talking to? Mr. Webb asked. Before I could answer, snow started falling inside the room. Not regular snow, thick, heavy snow that came from nowhere. The men pressed against the walls, their faces white with fear. This is impossible, one worker whispered. Please, I said to the children, speaking to the empty air. Let me help. But you have to let these men leave first. Scaring them won't fix anything. The snow kept falling. It was getting hard to see across the room. Dr. Thorne, Mr. Webb said, his voice shaking. What is happening here? I took a deep breath. There was no point in hiding it now. The children who died here in 1932, they're still here, and they're very upset about your building plans. One worker laughed, but it sounded forced. Children, lady, there's no one here but us. That's when we heard it. Children singing. A sad, slow song in voices that sounded far away and close at the same time. The workers stopped laughing. Mary, quite contrary. How does your garden grow? The voices were all around us, with silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. That's impossible, Mr. Webb whispered. The singing got louder, sadder. More voices joined in, tiny voices that broke your heart to hear. The snow was ankle-deep now, and the room was getting colder and colder. They're just children, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Scared children who died alone. They don't understand that you're not trying to hurt them. Children don't make snow fall indoors, one worker said, but he didn't sound sure anymore. I walked to the center of the room, snow crunching under my feet. Listen to me, I said to the children. These men are scared too. If you let them go, I'll stay and we can talk. Just you and me. The singing stopped. The room went completely quiet except for our breathing. You promise? A small voice asked. Only I could hear it, but I saw the workers look around nervously. I promise, I said. Slowly the doors creaked open. The snow stopped falling, but it didn't disappear. It just stayed there on the floor, proof that something impossible had happened. The workers ran for the doors without looking back. Mr. Webb started to follow them, then stopped. Dr. Thorne, you can't stay here alone, he said. This place is dangerous. It's not dangerous, I said. It's just sad. These children have been alone for 26 years. They need help. Children don't live for 26 years after they die, Mr. Webb said, but his voice was shaking. Their bodies died, I said. But the hurt part of them, the scared part, that's still here. And hurt children act out when they're frightened. They just want someone to care about them. Mr. Webb looked around the snowy room, at the shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. This is insane, he said. Maybe, I said, but it's also real, and I know how to help them. He stared at me for a long moment. How do you help dead children? The same way you help living children who are scared and hurt, I said. You listen to them, you show them they matter. You help them feel safe enough to let go of the fear. A soft voice whispered near my ear, so quiet only I could hear. Will you really help us? I nodded, even though Mr. Webb couldn't hear the question. What are you nodding at? He asked. They want to know if I'm really going to help them, I said. Mr. Webb looked around the room one more time. The shadows seemed to be watching him, waiting. This is the craziest thing I've ever been part of, he said finally. But those workers will never come back, and neither will any others. Not after this, he sighed. What do you need me to do? I smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. First, you need to understand that this isn't just a building project anymore. There are 23 children here who need help before anything else can happen. The shadows around the room seemed to get a little lighter, and the temperature warmed up just enough that we couldn't see our breath anymore. We're listening, a child's voice whispered, and this time I think Mr. Webb heard it too because his eyes got very wide. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, let's help them. Outside, the wind had stopped completely, and for the first time since I'd arrived, the camp felt peaceful instead of scared. The real work was just beginning. Over the next 3 days, I came to the camp every morning with my bag of toys and art supplies. Mr. Webb came too, though he mostly sat quietly in the corner and watched. He was still scared, but he was trying to understand. The children were shy at first. They would move my crayons around and whisper things only I could hear. But slowly, they started to trust me more. By the third day, I could see them clearly. 23 sad little faces watching me from around the room. "What are your names?" I asked them one morning. They looked at each other like they had forgotten. "We've been together so long," a little girl with pigtails said. "Sometimes we forget we used to be different people." "That's okay," I said. "We can remember together. Let's start with you." I pointed to the girl with pigtails. "Sarah," she said softly. "Sarah Miller. I was 8. "Hi, Sarah," I said. "I'm glad to meet you." One by one, they told me their names. Tommy, who was 6 and had lost both his parents in a car crash. Lucy, who was 10 and had been left at the orphanage as a baby. Michael, who was 12 and tried to take care of the younger kids. Each name, each story, each small face that lit up when I repeated their name back to them. For 26 years, they had been one big scared thing. Now they were starting to remember they were individuals, separate children with separate hurts, that needed separate healing, but not all of them wanted to be separate again. "If we're different people, we might get lonely," said a boy named Peter. "Being together kept us safe. Being together kept you stuck," I said gently. "You've been so busy taking care of each other that you never learned how to let go of the hurt." That afternoon, something changed. I was working with Sarah, helping her draw pictures of things that made her happy, when we heard cars coming up the mountain road. "Lots of cars." Mr. Webb looked out the window and his face went white. "It's the county officials," he said. "They're here to inspect the property before I can start building." The children heard this and immediately got upset. The temperature dropped, and frost started forming on the windows again. "They want to take our home away," Tommy said, his small face twisted with fear. "No," I said firmly. "Nobody is taking anything away. Mr. Webb, tell me exactly what these people want." "They need to approve the demolition," he said. "If they say the buildings are safe to tear down, my company can start work next week." The children's faces turned dark with anger. Outside, storm clouds were gathering fast, even though it had been sunny just minutes before. "We won't let them," Michael said. He was the oldest, and he always tried to protect the younger ones. "We'll make a storm so big they'll never come back." "Michael, wait," I said. "What if we could find another way? What if we could make sure your home stays safe without anyone getting hurt?" But Michael was too angry to listen. The other children were getting scared, and when they got scared, they got angry too. The wind started howling outside, and snow began falling so hard you couldn't see the cars anymore. The county officials were stuck in the storm, and I could hear them honking their car horns. They were probably terrified. "Children, please," I said. "This won't solve anything. Hurting people will just make them want to stay away from you forever." "Good," said Lucy. "We want them to stay away. But then you'll still be alone," I said. "Still stuck here, still scared. Is that really what you want?" The wind got stronger. Through the windows we could see the cars rocking back and forth in the storm. One of them slid sideways on the icy road. Mr. Webb grabbed my arm. "Dr. Thorne, someone could get killed out there." That's when I realized what I had to do. I stood up and walked to the center of the room, right where all the children could see me. "Stop," I said in my strongest voice. "Right now, stop the storm." The children looked at me with surprise. I had never used that tone with them before. "You're acting like bullies," I said, "and I don't help bullies. I help children who want to get better." "We're not bullies," Sarah said, tears in her ghostly eyes. "We're just scared." "Being scared doesn't give you the right to hurt other people," I said. "Those people in the cars didn't do anything wrong. They're just doing their jobs." "Their job is to destroy our home," Michael said. "No," I said. "Their job is to make sure buildings are safe, but we can talk to them. We can explain what this place means, but only if you stop the storm right now and let them be safe." The children looked at each other. The wind was still howling, but it wasn't getting stronger anymore. "What if they don't listen?" Peter asked. "Then we'll figure out something else," I said. "But we'll do it the right way." not by hurting people. Slowly, very slowly, the wind began to calm down. The snow kept falling, but not as hard. Outside I could see the cars weren't rocking anymore. "Thank you," I said. "That was very brave." The children smiled a little, but they still looked worried. Mr. Webb was staring out the window. "The storm is stopping, but those officials are going to have questions. What do I tell them?" I thought for a moment. Tell them the truth. Tell them this place has historical importance that needs to be preserved. Historical importance? 23 children died here, I said. That makes it a memorial, whether people know it or not, and memorials should be protected, not torn down. One of the county cars was finally able to drive up to the camp. Woman in a business suit got out, looking shaken and confused. "Mr. Webb," she called, "what happened to the weather? One minute it was sunny, the next we were in a blizzard." Mr. Webb looked at me, then at the children who were watching from the shadows. "Mountain weather," he said finally. "It changes fast up here. Maybe we should talk about this project some more before we make any final decisions." The woman nodded, still looking around nervously. "Actually, that might be a good idea. This storm came out of nowhere. It felt unusual." As she spoke, I heard Sarah whisper, "She can feel us, can't she? Some people can sense things even if they can't see them." I whispered back. The children smiled at that. They liked the idea that someone else might know they were there, even if they couldn't talk to them directly, but I knew this was just the beginning. We had bought some time, but Mr. Webb still had a business to run, and the county still had decisions to make, and the children still had 26 years of hurt that needed healing before they could finally rest in peace. The hardest part was still ahead of us. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time, it wasn't because of crying children. It was because I kept thinking about what the little girl Sarah had said. If we're different people, we might get lonely. The children were scared that if they healed and became individuals, again, they might have to face being alone. And being alone was the thing that had hurt them most when they were alive. The next morning, I went back to the camp with a new plan. Mr. Webb was already there, sitting at one of the small tables with a cup of coffee. He looked tired. "The county officials are coming back tomorrow," he said. "They want to do a full inspection, and my boss is asking questions about why the project is taking so long." I could see the children gathering around us, listening. They looked worried. "Mr. Webb," I said carefully, "what if this didn't have to be about building a hotel? What if we could find another way to use this land?" "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "What if we turned this place into something that honors the children who died here? A place where people could come to remember them?" The children's eyes got wide. Tommy stepped forward. "People would remember us?" "More than that," I said. "People would know your names. They would know your stories. You wouldn't be forgotten ever again." Sarah clapped her hands together. "Really? People would know about Sarah Miller and Tommy Jenkins," said Tommy. "And Lucy Chen," said Lucy. One by one, they said their full names, and each time they did, they looked a little more solid, a little more real. Mr. Webb was watching this with his mouth open. "They're getting clearer," he whispered. "They're remembering who they used to be," I said. "That's the first step in healing." But then Michael, the oldest boy, shook his head. "It won't work," he said sadly. "Adults don't really care about kids like us, especially dead kids. They'll just pretend to care, then forget about us anyway." "Michael," I said gently, "you were 12 when you died. You had to take care of everyone because the adults failed you. But not all adults are like that." "How do you know?" he asked. "Because I'm here," I said. "Mr. Webb is here. We're not going anywhere." Mr. Webb looked surprised when I said his name, but then he nodded slowly. "That's right," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, something amazing happened. Mr. Webb started talking to the children directly. At first, he couldn't see them clearly like I could, but he could sense where they were. "Sarah," he said to an empty chair, "Dr. Thorne told me you like to draw. Would you show me one of your pictures?" A piece of paper slid across the table toward him. It was a drawing of a little girl standing next to a big man in a fancy coat. Under it, Sarah had written, "My new friend, Mr. Webb." Mr. Webb's eyes filled with tears. "She drew me," he whispered. "She trusts you," I said. "They all do." Over the next few hours, Mr. Webb talked to each child. He asked about their favorite games, their favorite colors, what they missed most about being alive. And as he talked to them, something wonderful happened. They started to look more like regular children and less like sad shadows. But the real breakthrough came when Lucy asked a question that surprised everyone. "Mr. Webb," she said, "if people make a place to remember us, does that mean we can stop being scared?" "What do you mean?" he asked. "We've been scared for so long," she said. "Scared of being forgotten, scared of being alone, scared that no one cares. But if people remember us, if they know our names and our stories, then maybe we don't have to hold on to the scared feelings anymore." I felt my heart jump. This was exactly what I'd been hoping for. "Lucy," I said, "what do you think would happen if you let go of the scared feelings?" She thought for a moment. "Maybe we could leave. Not leave each other, but leave the hurt behind." "Where would you go?" Mr. Webb asked. All 23 children looked at each other, and for the first time since I'd met them, they smiled real smiles. "Somewhere warm," said Tommy. "Somewhere we can play," said Sarah. "Somewhere we don't have to be scared anymore," said Michael. "Somewhere we can be kids again," said Peter. I realized they were talking about heaven or whatever comes after life. They were ready to move on, but they'd been too scared to go alone. "You could all go together," I said softly. "You don't have to be apart." "Really?" Sarah asked. "Really?" I said. "But first, you have to be ready to let go of this place. Let go of the anger and the fear. Can you do that?" The children looked around the room, at the tables and chairs, at the drawings on the walls, at the place that had been their home for so long. "It's scary," Tommy admitted. "Most important things are scary at first," I said. "But you've been brave for 26 years. You can be brave for a little longer." Mr. Webb cleared his throat. "Children," he said, "I want to make you a promise. I'm going to make sure this place becomes a memorial for you, a beautiful place where people can come and learn about your lives. Your names will be on a big stone, and your pictures will be in the museum. Nobody will ever forget you. You promise?" Michael asked. "I promise," Mr. Webb said, "and I keep my promises." The children looked at each other one more time. Then, starting with the youngest and ending with Michael, they each nodded. "We're ready," Sarah said. The room got very quiet. Then, slowly, a warm golden light began to fill the space. It wasn't scary like the cold and snow had been. It was gentle and peaceful, like sunlight on a summer day. The children started to glow with the same warm light. They looked happy for the first time since I'd met them. "Thank you, Dr. Rebecca," they said together. "Thank you for helping us remember how to be brave." "Thank you for letting me help," I said, tears running down my face. One by one, they began to fade into the light, but they weren't disappearing. They were transforming into something peaceful and beautiful. Sarah was the last to go. She ran over and hugged me, and even though she was a spirit, I could feel her small arms around me. "Will you visit our memorial sometimes?" she asked. "Every year," I promised. "On the day you went to heaven." She smiled and stepped back into the light. "Goodbye, Dr. Rebecca. Goodbye, Mr. Webb. Thank you for caring about us." And then they were gone. The room was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full of peace and love, and the kind of quiet that comes after something beautiful has happened. Mr. Webb and I sat there for a long time, not saying anything. Finally he spoke. "Dr. Thorne," he said, "I think I need to make some phone In calls, this memorial isn't going to build itself, I smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea. 6 months later, the Camp Wildwood Memorial opened to the public. There's a beautiful stone with 23 names on it, and a small museum with pictures and stories of each child. People come from all over to visit and remember. And sometimes on warm summer days, visitors say they can hear the sound of children laughing and playing in the woods around the camp. Not sad, ghostly sounds, but the happy sounds of kids who are finally free to be children again. I still work as a child psychologist, but now I also help families who think they might have spirits in their homes. It turns out that most ghosts are just scared people who need someone to listen to them, just like the rest of us. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I'm a rock doctor. Well, that's what my little nephew calls me. Really, I'm a geologist, someone who studies rocks and mountains and how the earth works. I came to this spooky place called Perdition Hollow in West Virginia because something strange was happening to the rocks here. The mountains in this part of West Virginia are old, really, really old. They call this particular ridge Devil's Backbone because it looks like giant spine bones sticking up from the ground. Most people stay away from here. They say bad things happen in these hills. I drove my Jeep up the bumpy dirt road, my equipment bouncing around in the back. I had machines that could tell me what kind of rocks were underground, how old they were, and if anything weird was going on beneath our feet. My boss at the university sent me here because local people kept calling about strange sounds coming from deep inside the mountain. Probably just the old mines settling, I told myself as I parked near the biggest hill. Nothing a good scientist can't explain, but as soon as I stepped out of my car, I felt something wrong. The air was too quiet. No birds singing, no bugs buzzing. Even the wind seemed afraid to blow through these trees. I've been to lots of mountains, and they're usually full of life and sound. This place felt empty, like something had scared everything away. I set up my first machine, a thing that listens to vibrations deep underground. Back at college, we used it to find oil or check for earthquakes. But when I turned it on here, it started making noises I'd never heard before, beeping and crackling like it was picking up some kind of signal. That's weird, I said out loud, just to hear my own voice in all that silence. The readings on my screen didn't make sense. According to my machine, there was something moving deep inside the mountain, something big. But that was impossible. Rock doesn't move unless there's an earthquake, and there wasn't one happening. I tried a different machine, one that could see through rock using special waves. When I pointed it at the mountain, the screen went crazy. It showed empty spaces, underground, like giant rooms carved out of solid stone. But the strangest part was that these spaces seemed to be breathing, getting bigger and smaller like lungs. My hands started shaking as I stared at the screen. In all my years studying rocks and mountains, I'd never seen anything like this. Mountains don't breathe, they don't move. They definitely don't have empty rooms that pulse like a heartbeat. That's when I heard it. A sound so low and deep that I felt it in my chest more than heard it with my ears. It came from somewhere far below my feet, rumbling through the mountain, like a giant animal waking up from a very long sleep. I grabbed my equipment and ran back to my Jeep, my heart pounding. But as I threw my machines in the back, I noticed something that made my blood turn cold. Carved into a big oak tree near where I'd been working were some words, old and faded, but still readable. E. Whitmore, mine supervisor, 1932, Whitmore. That was my last name. My great-grandfather's name was Edmund, and I knew he'd worked in mines somewhere in West Virginia, but what were the chances I'd end up in the exact same place he'd been almost 100 years ago? As I drove away from Devil's Backbone Ridge that first day, I kept looking in my rearview mirror. I swear I could see the mountain moving, like it was watching me leave. And deep in my bones, I felt like something down there knew exactly who I was. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that deep rumble from inside the mountain. I kept thinking about my great-grandfather's name, carved in that tree. What had Edmund Whitmore been doing up there in 1932? The next morning, I drove to the small town at the bottom of the hills. Perdition Hollow only had about 200 people, and most of them had lived there their whole lives. If anyone knew about my great-grandfather, it would be someone here. I found what I was looking for at Maggie's Diner, a tiny place that smelled like coffee and bacon. The waitress, a woman with grey hair and kind eyes, poured me coffee without me even asking. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am, I'm Eleanor Whitmore. I'm studying the rocks up on Devil's Backbone Ridge." The coffee pot in her hand started shaking. She set it down carefully and stared at me with wide eyes. "Whitmore? You said Whitmore?" "Yes. Do you know that name?" She sat down across from me, her face pale. "Honey, everybody in this town knows about Edmund Whitmore. He was the mine boss back in 32 when the accident happened." My heart started beating faster. "What accident?" "The mine cave-in. Killed 12 men. But that's not the strange part." She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then whispered, "Edmund claims something came out of the deep tunnels, something that wasn't human. Said he had to do something to stop it, to keep it from hurting more people." I felt cold all over. "What kind of something?" Nobody believed him at first, but then people started seeing things, hearing things, rocks moving by themselves, animals running away from the mountain like they were scared of something. She shook her head. "Edmund disappeared into those hills 3 days after the cave-in. Never came back out." "Did anyone ever find him?" "No. But the strange things stopped happening after that until—" She looked at me carefully. "Until yesterday. Old Pete, who lives near the ridge, called this morning. Said he heard sounds from the mountain last night. Sounds he hadn't heard in 90 years. I left the diner with my head spinning. I drove straight to the town library. A small building that looked like it might fall down in the next strong wind. The librarian, a man older than dirt, helped me find the newspaper records from 1932. The headlines made my hands shake. 12 miners killed in Devil's Backbone cave-in. Mine supervisor claims creature responsible for deaths. Edmund Whitmore missing. Search called off." But the most important thing I found was tucked inside the last newspaper, a handwritten note in my great-grandfather's writing. "If anyone in my family ever comes back to this place, they need to know the truth. I didn't stop it. I only made it sleep. The creature is still down there waiting. Only Whitmore blood can keep it sleeping. If it wakes up, God help us all. Edmund." I sat in that dusty library staring at my great-grandfather's words and realized why my equipment had gone crazy on the mountain. Why the readings showed something breathing deep underground. Something had been asleep down there for 90 years, and when I showed up with my machines poking and prodding at the mountain, I had woken it up. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to ask. The librarian told me about Marie Walks with Stones, an old Cherokee woman who lived on the other side of town. Her family had been in these mountains long before any white people came here. I found her house as the sun was setting. She was sitting on her porch, rocking slowly in an old wooden chair. When she saw me walking up her path, she stopped rocking. "You're the Whitmore girl," she said before I could introduce myself. "How did you know?" "Because I've been waiting for you to come back." She stood up slowly, her old bones creaking like tree branches. "Took you long enough. That thing's been stirring for weeks now. My grandmother told me a Whitmore would have to come back someday to fix what Edmund did wrong." I sat down on her porch steps, feeling like the world was spinning around me. What did he do wrong? Marie's dark eyes looked at me seriously. "He made a deal he didn't understand. Used Cherokee magic he wasn't supposed to touch. Bound that creature to the mountain using his own blood. But he did it all wrong. Made it angry instead of peaceful. What is it, this creature? Something old, older than the mountains themselves. It's not evil, child. It's just protecting what's left of the wild places. But Edmund's binding made it full of rage. Now it wants revenge on everyone who hurts the earth. I thought about all the mining that had happened in these hills over the years. All the digging and blasting and tearing apart of the mountain. How do I fix it? Marie smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. That's the question, isn't it? Your great-grandfather's blood runs in your veins. The creature is already calling to you. Can you feel it? As soon as she said it, I could. A pulling sensation, like something invisible had a rope tied around my heart, tugging me back toward Devil's Backbone Ridge. I had felt it all day, but hadn't understood what it was. It's getting stronger, Marie said, watching my face. The longer you stay away, the angrier it gets. And when it gets angry enough, she shook her head. This whole mountain could come down. I didn't want to go back to Devil's Backbone Ridge, but I knew I had to. Marie gave me a small leather bag filled with herbs and told me to keep it in my pocket. It won't stop the creature, she said, but it might help you think clearly when things get strange. The next morning, I drove back, up that bumpy dirt road. This time, I wasn't alone. My friend Jake Brennan, a park ranger, had insisted on coming with me. He didn't believe in monsters, but he was worried about me going into the mountains by myself. This is probably just some kind of gas leak making weird sounds, Jake said as we got out of my Jeep. Maybe some old mine tunnels shifting around, but I could see he was nervous too. The silence was even worse than before. No wind, no birds. Even the leaves on the trees weren't moving. It felt like the whole mountain was holding its breath. I set up my equipment again, and right away the readings went crazy. Whatever was down there had gotten bigger, stronger. The empty spaces I'd seen before now stretched for miles underground, like a whole city carved out of solid rock. "Eleanor," Jake said quietly. He was staring at something behind me. I turned around and felt my heart stop. The tree with my great-grandfather's name carved in it was different. The carving was deeper now, like someone had been digging at it with their fingernails. And underneath Edmund's name, new words had appeared. "She has returned. The blood calls." "Did you carve that?" Jake asked, his voice shaky. "No, I've never seen those words before." That's when we heard the sound again, that deep rumble from inside. The mountain. But this time it was different. It sounded almost like words, like something trying to talk to us from far underground. Jake grabbed his radio to call for help, but it just made static noises. My cell phone was dead too, even though it had been fully charged. All my electronic equipment started going haywire, showing numbers that made no sense. "We need to leave," Jake said. "Right now." But before we could move, the ground under our feet started to shake. Not like an earthquake, more like something huge was moving around down there. Rocks began falling from the ridge above us, bouncing and crashing through the trees. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow between the trees. But shadows don't move against the light. This thing was tall, maybe 8 feet. And shaped like a person, but wrong somehow. Its arms were too long, and when it moved, it seemed to flow like water instead of walking. "Do you see that?" I whispered to Jake. He followed my eyes and went completely white. "What is that thing?" The creature turned toward us, and I saw its face, or where its face should have been. Instead, there was just smooth stone, like someone had carved a person out of the mountain itself. But somehow, I knew it was looking at us. Then it spoke. Not with a mouth, because it didn't have one. The words came from everywhere at once. From the rocks, from the trees, from the air itself. "Whitmore blood," it said, and the sound made my bones vibrate. "You came back!" Jake tried to run, but his feet wouldn't move. It was like the ground was holding him in place. I wanted to run too, but something inside me knew that wouldn't work. This thing had been waiting for me. There was nowhere to go. "What do you want?" I managed to say. "Freedom," it answered. Revenge. The mountain bleeds from their machines. The earth cries from their digging. They must pay. The miners from 1932, they're all dead now. Not them. The creature stepped closer, and I could feel cold radiating from its stone body. All of them. Everyone who hurts the earth. Your kind never learns. I thought about all the strip mining, all the mountaintop removal, all the ways people had torn apart these ancient hills for coal and profit. The creature wasn't wrong. We had hurt this place badly. But then I looked at Jake, frozen in terror, and knew I had to do something. "My great-grandfather bound you once," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can do it again." The creature laughed, and the sound was like rocks grinding together. "Edmund's binding was weak, made in fear. It only made me sleep. Now I am awake, and I am angry." The air around us started to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But this was different. I could see through the shimmering to somewhere else. Another place that looked like our mountain, but the rocks were glowing and the trees were made of crystal. "Two worlds," I whispered, understanding flooding through me. "You exist in two worlds at once. You begin to see," the creature said. "In the stone realm I am strong. In your world I am limited. But the boundary grows thin. Soon I will bring my realm here, and your machines will turn to dust." That's when Jake screamed. I turned to see him flickering like a TV with bad reception. 1 second he was there, solid and real. The next second, I could see right through him to the rocks behind. He was being pulled into that other world, the stone realm. "Those who stand with the earth killers will be removed," the creature said. "Stop!" I shouted. "He's not your enemy. He protects the forests." But Jake was fading fast. His scream cut off as he became more ghost than person. I could see the terror in his eyes as he reached out to me, but his hand passed right through mine. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the leather bag Marie had given me and threw the herbs at the creature. The moment they touched its stone skin, there was a flash of light, and Jake snapped back to solid form. "Run!" I yelled. This time, our feet obeyed us. We ran through. The trees, branches catching at our clothes, rocks trying to trip us. Behind us, the creature's voice boomed across the mountain. "You cannot run from your blood, Eleanor Whitmore. I will find you, and when I do, you will choose. Help me cleanse this world, or watch everyone you care about disappear forever." We made it to the Jeep and drove away as fast as the old road would let us. But in my rearview mirror, I could see the mountain changing. Trees were turning to crystal. Rocks were glowing with their own light. The stone realm was bleeding through into our world, and I knew that no matter how far I ran, it would keep spreading until I came back and faced whatever my great-grandfather had started all those years ago. Jake and I drove straight to Marie's house. He was shaking so badly he could barely walk up her porch steps. Marie took one look at us and knew something terrible had happened. "It spoke to you," she said. "It wasn't a question." "It almost took Jake into that other world," I said, sinking. "Into her porch chair, and it's spreading. The stone realm is coming into our world." Marie nodded grimly. "That's what I was afraid of. The creature isn't just angry now. It's desperate. Your great-grandfather's binding has been holding it back for 90 years, but bindings like that aren't meant to last forever." "So, what do I do?" "You have 3 choices, child." Marie sat down across from me, her old hands folded in her lap. "First, you can try to make a new binding. Lock it away again, but this time do it right. Second, you can try to destroy it completely. Or, third," she paused, looking at me carefully, "you can join with it." "Join with it? You mean help it?" "The creature isn't evil, Eleanor. It's the mountain's way of protecting itself. All these years of mining and drilling and blasting, the earth is in pain. The creature feels that pain, like you'd feel someone cutting into your body with a knife." I thought about the strip mines I'd seen driving through West Virginia. Whole mountaintops cut away, leaving behind empty holes that looked like wounds in the earth. But it wants to hurt people, I said. It wants to stop people from hurting the mountain. Sometimes, when you're in enough pain, you don't think clearly about how to make it stop. Jake, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. What happens if we don't do anything? Marie's face went dark. The stone realm will keep spreading. Everything it touches will change. Trees will turn to crystal. Rivers will flow uphill. The laws of nature that keep our world stable will break down. Eventually, both worlds will destroy each other. How long do we have? Days. Maybe a week if we're lucky. I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a mountain. 3 choices and people's lives hanging in the balance. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the creature's stone face, about Jake almost disappearing, about my great-grandfather Edmund, and whatever choice he'd made up in those hills. Around midnight, I made my decision. I was going back to Devil's Backbone Ridge, alone. I left Jake sleeping on Marie's couch and drove up the mountain one more time. The road was worse now. Rocks had fallen across it, and some places the pavement was cracked and glowing with that strange light from the stone realm. When I reached the clearing where I'd first set up my equipment, I could see that everything had changed. The trees were half crystal now, catching moonlight and throwing it back in rainbow colors. The rocks hummed with energy, and the air itself seemed thick and alive. The creature was waiting for me. I knew you would return, it said, its voice coming from everywhere at once. Whitmore blood always comes back. I want to understand, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Show me what my great-grandfather did. Show me what went wrong. The air shimmered, and suddenly I wasn't standing in the clearing anymore. I was deep underground, in tunnels that looked like they'd been carved by something with claws. Miners with old-fashioned helmets and lanterns were digging, their pickaxes ringing against stone. They dug too deep, the creature's voice echoed. Around me. Broke through the barrier between worlds. I came through to stop them. I watched as the tunnel walls began to crack and glow. The miners screamed and ran, but some weren't fast enough. The creature flowed through the cracks like living shadow, and where it touched them, they turned to stone. 12 died before your ancestor came, the creature continued. He offered his blood to bind me, to send me back, but he did it wrong. Now I saw Edmund Whitmore, my great-grandfather, standing in the tunnel with a Cherokee medicine man. They were chanting words I didn't understand, and Edmund was cutting his hand, letting blood drip onto the stone floor. The binding should have been willing, the creature said. A partnership. Instead, he made it a prison. Trapped me between worlds, unable to return home, unable to fully enter yours. The vision faded and I was back in the clearing. The creature stood before me, and for the first time I thought I could see sadness in its stone features. 90 years, I whispered. You've been trapped for 90 years. 90 years of watching. Your kind destroy what I was meant to protect. 90 years of feeling the mountain's pain and being unable to help. I understood now. The creature wasn't a monster. It was a guardian that had been driven mad by decades of imprisonment and helplessness. What do you want me to do? Choose, it said. Bind me again and condemn me to another century of torment. Try to destroy me and watch both worlds tear apart. Or, it stepped closer. Join with me, become the bridge between worlds. Help me heal what has been broken. What would that mean? Joining with you. You would become like me, part of both worlds, able to speak for the earth to your kind and for your kind to the earth. The mountain would live through you and you would live through the mountain. I looked around at the clearing, half transformed, into something beautiful and strange. Crystal trees caught starlight and threw it back in patterns that made my heart ache with wonder. The rocks sang soft songs, and I could feel the mountain's ancient presence, patient and strong and full of life. Would I still be human? You would be more than human, and less. Changed, but still yourself. I thought about my life, my job at the university, my little apartment, my plans for the future. Then I thought about the pain in the creature's voice, about the mountain's suffering, about the spreading damage that would destroy both worlds if I did nothing. The choice was mine. And deep in my heart, I already knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the creature. I'll do it. I'll join with you. The creature went very still. Are you certain? There is no going back. I'm certain. And I was. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt completely sure about something. But I have conditions. Speak. No more hurting people. Even if they're hurting the mountain, we find other ways to stop them. We teach them instead of punishing them. The creature was quiet for a long moment, then, agreed. What else? We heal the damage that's already been done. Both worlds need to be fixed, not just protected. Yes, that is what I have always wanted. I held out my hand, the same way my great-grandfather must have done 90 years ago. But this time, it wasn't about binding or trapping. It was about joining together for something bigger than either of us alone. How do we do this? I asked. Trust, the creature said simply, and love for the earth. When its stone hand touched mine, everything changed. At first it hurt, not like getting cut or burned, but like growing, the way your legs ache when you're getting taller, but happening to my whole body and mind at once. I could feel the creature's memories flowing into me, centuries of watching over the mountain, feeling every tree that was cut down, every animal that lost its home, every stream that was poisoned. But I could also feel its love, the deep, patient love it had for every rock and root and living thing in these hills, the way it knew each tree by name, each bird by its song, each season by the way the earth smelled when it changed. And then I felt something else. The mountain itself. Not just rocks and dirt, but a living presence that was ancient beyond imagination. The mountain was awake, and it was welcoming me home. My body changed. I could feel it happening, but it didn't scare me. My skin took on a faint glow, like moonlight on water. My hair became streaked with silver that caught light like metal. When I looked at my hands, I could see through them to the bones beneath. But the bones looked like beautiful white stone instead of regular bone. How do I look? I asked, and my voice sounded different, deeper, like it was coming from the earth itself. Like a bridge, the creature said. Like hope. And I could see what it meant. When I looked around the clearing, I could see both worlds at once. The regular world where trees were trees and rocks were rocks, and the stone realm where everything was made of living crystal and light flowed like water between the mountains. But more than that, I could feel both worlds. I knew where every damaged place was, every spot that needed healing, and I knew how to fix them. Over the next few days, Jake and Marie watched in amazement as the mountain began to heal itself. The scars from old strip mines filled in with new growth. Poisoned streams ran clean again. Animals that had fled the area started coming back. But the most amazing thing was that people started changing too. Mining companies that had planned to tear down more mountains suddenly decided to invest in clean energy instead. Loggers who had been cutting down old forests realized they'd rather plant new trees. It wasn't magic exactly. It was more like people were finally able to hear what the earth had been trying to tell them all along. I could do that now. I could speak to the part of people that remembered being connected to nature before cities and machines made them forget. Most people wanted to help the earth. They just needed someone to show them how. Of course, not everyone was happy about the changes. Some mining companies tried to fight back, bringing in bigger machines to tear up the mountain faster, but when they arrived, their equipment simply wouldn't work. Engines died, computer systems crashed. It was like the earth itself was saying no to being hurt. Word spread quickly. Scientists came from universities all over the world to study what was happening on Devil's Backbone Ridge. They found things that shouldn't exist, rocks that could heal themselves, trees that grew 10 times faster than normal, water that was cleaner coming out of the ground than when it went in. I talked to some of them, explaining as much as I could in ways they might understand. Some believed me. Others thought I was crazy. But they all agreed that something remarkable was happening here. The creature, I learned its real name was Stoneheart, became my partner in everything we did. Most people couldn't see it the way I could, but they could feel its presence. A sense of peace and protection that spread out from the mountain like ripples on a pond. Months passed, then years. The healing spread far beyond Devil's Backbone Ridge. Mountains all over the world started showing signs of the same kind of recovery. It was like the earth had remembered how to fix itself and was teaching that knowledge to every damaged place. I aged, but slowly. The stone part of me made my body stronger, while the human part kept me connected to the people I was trying to help. I never got sick, I never felt truly tired, and I never stopped learning new ways to heal the world. Jake stayed nearby, becoming something like my assistant and translator. When government officials or scientists needed to understand what was happening, Jake could explain it in ways that made sense to them. He aged normally, but he always said these were the best years of his life. Marie lived to be over 100, and we spent many evenings on her porch talking about the old stories and the new ones we were creating. Before she died, she told me that her grandmother's spirit was proud of what we'd accomplished. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have been like if I'd never come to Devil's Backbone Ridge. I might have had a normal job, a normal family, a normal human lifespan. But then I'd feel the mountain breathing beneath my feet, or watch a polluted river run clean again, or see the wonder in a child's eyes when they touched a tree that glowed with inner light. And I knew I'd made the right choice. Because here's the secret I learned. We're all connected to the earth, whether we remember it or not. Every person carries a little bit of stone and soil and starlight in their bones. We came from the earth, and someday we'll return to it. My job is just to help people remember that connection while they're here. The mountain and I are still here, still working, still healing what can be healed. And if you ever find yourself in the hills of West Virginia, walking through forests that seem more alive than they should be, breathing air that tastes like pure mountain water, feeling peace settle into your bones like you've finally come home, that's us saying hello. Some people call it magic. I call it love. And sometimes if you're very quiet and you listen with your heart instead of your ears, you might hear the mountain singing. It's a song about patience and growth, about healing and hope, about the ancient partnership between earth and sky and everything in between. It's a song that reminds us we're never really alone. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and I am the bridge between worlds. This is my story. But in a way, it's everyone's story because we all have choices to make about how we treat the world that gave us life. Choose carefully, choose with love. The earth is listening. My name is Vincent Murphy, and I used to be a cop in Detroit. Used to be a lot of things, actually. Now I'm just a guy trying to get as far away from his past as possible. The truck's engine coughed like an old man with too many cigarettes as I drove down the dirt road. Nothing but empty land for miles. Montana was supposed to be my fresh start, but looking at all this emptiness made my chest feel tight. I reached for the bottle under my seat and took a quick drink. The whiskey burned, but it helped quiet the voices in my head. Crosswind Ranch sat in a valley between two hills. The house was old and painted white, but the paint was peeling like dead skin. A few barns scattered around the property, and cattle dotted the fields. It looked peaceful enough, but something felt off. Maybe it was just me. Everything felt off. These days, I parked next to a rusty pickup truck and got out. The wind hit me hard, carrying the smell of hay and something else I couldn't name, something that made my skin crawl. "You must be Vincent." A young man jogged over from the barn. He had sandy hair and a smile too big for his face. Couldn't be more than 19 or 20. Clean-cut kid, the kind that probably never saw real trouble. "I'm Bobby Abernathy. My granddad's expecting you." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, but his palms were soft. Rich kid playing cowboy. "Thanks for the work," I said. "I can start today if you need me to." "Course, Granddad's inside. Come on, I'll show you around first." Bobby walked me toward the house, chattering about the ranch like a tour guide. How many cattle they had, how long the family owned the land, how peaceful it was out here. I only half listened. My eyes kept moving, checking corners and shadows. Old habits from the force. The front door opened before we reached it. An old Mexican woman stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. She had gray hair pulled back tight and dark eyes that seemed to see right through you. "This is Maria Santos," Bobby said. "Best cook in Montana. She keeps us all fed." Maria nodded at me but didn't smile. Those dark eyes stayed on my face like she was reading something written there. "Bienvenido," she said quietly. "Welcome." But her voice didn't sound welcoming. It sounded like a warning. Inside, the house was cooler and smelled like coffee and old wood. Bobby led me to a sitting room where an old man waited in a leather chair. He had white hair and hands covered in liver spots, but his back was straight and his eyes were sharp. "Granddad, this is Vincent Murphy." The old man stood up slower than he wanted to, I could tell. "Samuel Abernathy. Good to meet you, son." His handshake was firm too, but I felt the tremor in his fingers. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Both looked the same when you'd seen enough of each. "Bobby says you need a ranch hand," I said. "That's right. Lost our last man a month ago. Just up and quit. In the middle of the night. Left a note saying the place gave him the creeps." Samuel laughed, but it sounded forced. "Some people got no backbone." I thought about the bottle in my truck and wondered what kind of backbone I had left. "Can't promise I'll stay forever," I said, "but I'll work hard while I'm here. That's all I ask." Samuel sat back down with a grunt. "Bobby will show you to the bunkhouse. Supper's at 6. Maria makes the best beef stew you ever tasted." Bobby walked me back outside toward a small building behind the main house. The bunkhouse was simple. A bed, a dresser, and a small table. Clean but cold, like a jail cell I once saw. "So what brings you all the way out here?" Bobby asked, leaning against the doorframe. The question I'd been dreading. I had my story ready. Needed a change. City life got too loud. It wasn't exactly a lie. Detroit had gotten loud toward the end. Loud with screaming and sirens and sounds I tried to forget. "Well, you'll find plenty of quiet here," Bobby said. "Sometimes too much quiet, if you ask me." After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my bottle. The whiskey was warm from sitting in the truck, but I didn't care. It still did its job. Through the small window, I could see the cattle in the distance, black shapes against the brown grass, moving slow and lazy. Normal. Peaceful. So why did I feel like something was watching me? I took another drink and tried to push the feeling away. It was just nerves. New place, new people. Give it a few days and everything would settle down. But as the sun started to set behind the hills, painting the sky red like blood, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible mistake coming here. The wind picked up again, rattling the windows of the bunkhouse. And somewhere in that wind, I swear I heard something that sounded like howling. I finished the bottle that night and slept with one eye open, just like the old days in Detroit. Some habits you never lose, no matter how far you run. I woke up to Bobby pounding on my door. "Vincent, you need to see this." The sun was barely up, and my head felt like someone had hit it with a hammer. Empty bottle on the floor told me why. I pulled on my boots and stumbled outside. Bobby was already walking toward the east pasture, moving fast. I followed him, trying to ignore the sick feeling in my stomach. Probably just the whiskey, but something told me it was more than that. Found it during my morning check, Bobby said over his shoulder. Never seen anything like it. We reached a small hill and Bobby stopped. He pointed down into the valley. There, 3 cows lay in the grass, dead. But not just dead, arranged. Someone had placed them in a perfect triangle, heads pointing toward the center. Each cow had been cut open, but there was hardly any blood on the ground. Jesus, I whispered. Bobby ran his hands through his hair. Who would do something like this? And why? I walked closer to get a better look. 20 years as a cop taught me to notice details. The cuts were clean, made with something sharp. No tracks around the bodies except cow prints and our boots. No tire marks or footprints from whoever did this. We should call the sheriff, I said. Granddad already did. Sheriff Martinez is coming out this afternoon. Bobby kicked at the dirt. This is going to cost us a fortune. Those were good cattle. I kept staring at the dead cows. Something about the way they were positioned bothered me. It reminded me of something, but I couldn't remember what. Any wild animals around here? I asked. Bears, wolves. Few black bears in the mountains, but they don't hunt like this. And there haven't been wolves in Montana for years. Bobby shook his head. This was people, Vincent, had to be. We walked back to the house for breakfast. Maria had eggs and bacon ready, but I could barely eat. The coffee was strong and black, just how I liked it, but even that tasted wrong. You look pale, Maria said, setting down more coffee. Bad dreams. Something like that. She studied my face with those dark eyes. This land has many dreams. Not all of them good ones. Bobby laughed, but it sounded nervous. Don't mind Maria. She's always talking about spirits and old stories. Old stories are important, Maria said quietly. They teach us things we need to know. After breakfast, Bobby showed me around the ranch. We checked fences, counted cattle, and did normal ranch work, but I couldn't stop thinking about those dead cows. Every shadow looked wrong. Every sound made me jump. Around lunchtime, we were fixing a gate when Bobby started talking. My family's owned this land for over 100 years, he said, hammering a loose board. Great-great-grandfather bought it from the government back in 1875. Got it for almost nothing. Why so cheap? Bobby shrugged. Land was considered worthless back then. Too far from town, hard to farm. But my ancestors saw the potential. I wanted to ask more, but something in Bobby's voice told me to let it go. Some family stories were better left alone. That afternoon, Sheriff Martinez showed up. He was a big man with a gray mustache and tired eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen everything and wasn't surprised by much anymore. We walked out to look at the cows. The sheriff took pictures and made notes, just like I used to do, but I could tell he was as confused as we were. Could be some kind of cult thing, he said. We had problems with devil worshippers over in Billings a few years back. They killed animals for their ceremonies. You think that's what this is? Bobby asked. Don't know, but I'll ask around, see if anyone's heard anything. The sheriff put away his notebook. You boys keep your eyes open. If this happens again, call me right away. After he left, Bobby and I spent the rest of the day moving the cattle to a pasture, closer to the house. Neither of us said it, but we both felt better having them where we could watch them. Dinner was quiet. Samuel barely touched his food, and Maria kept glancing toward the windows, like she expected something to appear. Only Bobby tried to keep things normal, talking about ranch business and the weather. But when he thought no one was looking, I saw Bobby staring out at the darkness too. That night I sat in the bunkhouse with a new bottle I'd bought in town. The whiskey helped, but not enough. Every time the wind blew, I thought I heard something moving outside. Footsteps, or maybe paws. Around midnight, I looked out my window toward the main house. A light was on in what looked like the kitchen. Maria's shadow moved back and forth, like she was pacing. I was about to close the curtains when I saw something else. Movement in the field beyond the house. Dark shapes running low to the ground. Too big to be coyotes, too fast to be cattle. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The cold air hit me like a slap, and the shapes were gone. Just empty grass swaying in the wind. But I could smell something in the air, something wild and dangerous that made every hair on my neck stand up. I went back inside and double-checked the lock on my door. Then I sat on the bed with the bottle in one hand and my old service pistol in the other. The gun felt good in my hand, familiar, like meeting an old friend after too many years apart. Outside, something howled, long and low and full of anger. Took another drink and tried to tell myself it was just coyotes, just the wind, just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. Whatever killed those cows was still out there, watching us, waiting for something. And for the first time since leaving Detroit, I wondered if running away had brought me somewhere even worse. The nightmares started on my third night at the ranch. Was back in Detroit wearing my police uniform. Rain pounded the streets and I could hear shouting from somewhere ahead. My partner Jake was next to me, his face twisted with anger. "Dirty Indians think they can block our streets," he said. "Time to teach them a lesson." In the dream, I watched myself raise my nightstick, watched myself bring it down on a man's head. The man fell, blood running into the gutter. He looked up at me with dark eyes full of pain and asked, "Why?" I woke, up sweating, my heart pounding like a drum. The bottle on my nightstand was half empty. I couldn't remember drinking that much before bed. Outside, something was howling again. The next morning, Bobby found me sitting on the porch steps, smoking a cigarette. My hands were shaking and I couldn't make them stop. "You look like hell," he said, sitting down next to me. "Didn't sleep much. The howling kept you up too." I looked at him. "You heard it? Every night since you got here." Bobby rubbed his eyes. "Granddad says it's just coyotes, but I've never heard coyotes sound like that." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind blow through the grass. It was peaceful, but the peace felt fake, like something was hiding underneath it. "Bobby," I said, "tell me more about your family, about how they got this land." His face changed. The easy smile disappeared. "Why do you want to know?" "Just curious. Yesterday you said your great-great-grandfather bought it from the government. What happened to the people who lived here before?" Bobby was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. "There were Indians here, Crow tribe, I think, but they were moved to a reservation." "Moved or forced?" I don't know the details, but I could tell he was lying, or at least not telling me everything. That afternoon, Bobby said he had business in town and drove off in his truck. Samuel was napping in his chair, and Maria was hanging laundry outside. I decided to explore the house. The living room had old photographs on the walls. Men with serious faces and big mustaches, standing next to horses and cattle. In one picture, a man who looked like Bobby stood in front of a group of buildings, the same buildings that were now the ranch. But something was wrong with the picture. In the background, I could see shapes that might have been teepees, and dark stains on the ground that looked like they might have been blood. I heard footsteps behind me. "You should not look at those." Maria stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Why not?" "Some pictures hold too much pain, too much guilt." She walked over and turned the photograph face down. "Maria, what really happened here when Bobby's family first came?" She looked around, making sure Samuel wasn't awake. Then she moved closer and lowered her voice. "My grandmother told me stories. Her grandmother was here when the soldiers came, when the ranch was built." "What kind of stories?" Maria's hands twisted together like she was trying to wash something off them. "Blood stories, death stories, the kind that don't let the dead rest." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. The Crow people had a camp here, she continued. Sacred hunting ground. The soldiers came in winter when families were weak and hungry. They said the Indians had to leave, but some refused. What happened to them? What always happened? Guns and fire. Women and children running through snow, bleeding into the white ground. Maria's voice was so quiet I could barely hear her. Bobby's ancestor bought the land 3 days later, built the ranch on top of the camp. My stomach felt sick. Not from the whiskey this time, from something deeper. How many died? Grandmother said 50, maybe more. They buried them in a mass grave somewhere on the property. Maria looked toward the window. But spirits don't stay buried when they die angry. That evening, Bobby came back from town with supplies and a newspaper. He seemed nervous, avoiding my eyes when we talked. During dinner, he kept glancing at his grandfather like he wanted to ask something but was afraid. Finally, Samuel put down his fork. Something on your mind, boy? Bobby took a breath. I went to the library today, did some reading about the ranch's history. Samuel's face went hard as stone. What kind of reading? About the Crow Indians, about what happened here in 1875. The old man was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. That was a long time ago. Before you were born, before your father was born. But it happened, didn't it? The massacre. It wasn't a massacre. It was a military action. The Indians were warned to leave. Some chose to stay and fight. They were protecting their families. Samuel slammed his hand on the table. They were trespassing on government land. My great-grandfather paid good money for this property. Everything he did was legal. Bobby flinched but didn't back down. Legal doesn't always mean right. Right. Samuel's face was red with anger. You want to talk about right? My family built something here. Worked this land for 4 generations. Fed cattle, employed people, contributed to the community. That's what matters. What about the people who died? What about them? They're gone. We're still here. That's how the world works, boy. The strong survive and the weak don't. The room went silent except for the sound of Samuel's heavy breathing. Maria stood up and started clearing dishes, her movements quick and nervous. I excused myself and went back to the bunkhouse. My hands were shaking again, and I needed a drink. But when I opened my bottle, all I could think about were the faces. In my dream, the man with dark eyes asking why. I'd spent 20 years trying to forget Detroit, trying to forget the protests and the beatings and the blood on my nightstick, but sitting in that bunkhouse, surrounded by the ghosts of another massacre, it all came flooding back. The howling started earlier that night, closer to the house, and this time I swear I could hear words in it, not English words, but something older, something angry. I sat on my bed with my gun in my lap, watching the shadows move outside my window. The whiskey wasn't helping anymore. Nothing was helping, because deep down I was starting to understand why I'd really come to this place, why the job ad had caught my eye, why I'd driven all the way from Detroit to the middle of nowhere. I wasn't running from my past. My past had been calling me here all along, and now it was time to pay for what I'd done. The 5th night changed everything. I was sitting on the porch, unable to sleep again. The bottle was getting lighter, but my head was getting heavier. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made me jump. That's when I saw them, 5 shapes walking across the field toward the house. At first I thought they were men, but they moved wrong. Too smooth, too quiet, and they were big, really big. I rubbed my eyes thinking it was the whiskey playing tricks, but when I looked again, they were closer. Close enough to see they weren't men at all. They were wolves, but not like any wolves I'd ever seen. These were huge, with silver, fur that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Their eyes burned yellow-green, like car headlights. The biggest one stopped about 20 feet from the porch. It looked right at me with those burning eyes, and I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Then it spoke, not in English, in a language I'd never heard before, but somehow I understood every word. Vincent Murphy, killer of the innocent. We have been waiting for you. I dropped my bottle. It shattered on the porch, whiskey spreading like blood. What do you want? The wolf tilted its massive head. When it spoke again, its voice sounded like wind through dry grass. Justice for Detroit, for the beaten and broken, for the people you hurt when they only wanted their voices heard. My mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. You know. The wolf's lips pulled back, showing teeth like white knives. November 15th, 1967, the American Indian Movement protest. You and your partner beat 3 men unconscious. 1 never walked again. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. Jake laughing as we dragged the protesters into the alley. The sound of my nightstick breaking ribs. The man on the ground, blood running from his mouth, saying, "Please, I have children." That was my job. I was following orders. Your job was to protect. You chose to destroy. The other wolves moved closer, forming a circle around the porch. I could feel their hatred rolling off them like heat from a fire. October 3rd, 1968, the big wolf continued. You planted drugs on Thomas Crow Feather, sent him to prison for 5 years. He died there. Another memory, another face. I tried to push them away, but they kept coming. May 12th, 1969. You beat Sarah Standing Bear so badly she lost her baby. Stop! July 20th, 1970. You... Stop! I screamed. The wolf's eyes blazed brighter. We could go on. 20 years of badges and beatings. 20 years of pain you caused to our people. I fumbled for my gun, but my hands were shaking too bad to draw it. But those crimes were in Detroit, the wolf said. Why do you think you came here, to this place? I stared at him, confused and terrified. This land knows blood, Vincent Murphy. It remembers the massacre of 1875. It remembers the children who died in the snow. And it remembers that blood calls to blood. Evil calls to evil. The truth hit me, like a lightning bolt. You brought me here. We called, you answered, because deep in your guilty heart, you knew it was time. Time for what? Time to complete the circle. The Abernathy family took our sacred land with violence, built their wealth on our bones, and you continued their work in the city, hunting our people, hurting our people. The wolf stepped closer. Its breath smelled like winter and death. Now all the guilty are in one place. The family that stole our land, the man who hunted our children. Justice can finally be served. I managed to pull out my gun, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. I was just doing my job. You chose your job. You chose your actions. You chose to be a weapon against the innocent. I didn't know. I was young and stupid, and now you are old and drunk and full of guilt that eats you from the inside. The wolf's voice was almost gentle now. Why do you think you drink, Vincent Murphy? Why do you think you run? Why do you think you wake up screaming? I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, because somewhere in your broken heart, you know what you are, what you've always been. Tears were running down my face. The gun felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. Sorry is a word. We need more than words. The wolf looked toward the main house, where a light had come on in Bobby's room. The boy is not guilty of his ancestors' crimes, but the debt must still be paid. Blood for blood, pain for pain. Don't hurt him, he's just a kid. Then who should pay, Vincent Murphy? Who should answer for a century of violence? I looked at the gun in my hands, looked at the wolves surrounding me, looked at the house where Bobby and Samuel slept, not knowing what was waiting for them, and for the first time in 20 years, I knew exactly what I had to do. Me, I whispered. I should pay. The wolf nodded slowly. At last, truth. The other wolves began to circle closer. Their eyes burned like stars. Their teeth gleamed like ice. Wait, I said. If you take me, will you leave the others alone? The wolf considered this. The boy has done no harm to our people. If he proves his heart is different from his grandfather's, he may live. But the old man, the wolf's eyes went dark. Samuel Abernathy knows what his family did. He has chosen to honor it instead of making amends. And me? You, Vincent Murphy, will pay for every tear you caused, every bone you broke, every life you destroyed. I closed my eyes and felt a strange kind of peace wash over me. For the first time since Detroit, the voices in my head went quiet. When I opened my eyes, the wolves were moving, fast as shadows, silent as death. I raised my gun, but not to shoot them, because finally, after all these years of running, I understood something important. Sometimes the only way to find peace is to stop fighting the thing that's been hunting you. Sometimes the only way to make things right is to pay the price you've been avoiding. I dropped the gun and spread my arms wide. "I'm ready," I said. The last thing I saw was yellow-green eyes, bright as justice itself. The wolves were on me before I could blink. Pain exploded through my chest as massive jaws clamped down. I felt ribs crack like dry sticks. Blood filled my mouth, hot and metallic. The world spun as claws raked across my arms and legs, but the strangest thing was how quiet it was. No snarling, no growling, just the sound of my own breathing getting weaker and weaker. The big wolf looked into my eyes as my life drained away. There was no anger in those yellow-green depths anymore, just sadness, old, deep sadness that had been waiting too long for. "Justice, it is finished," he said. Then everything went black. Bobby woke up to screaming. He shot out of bed, heart pounding, and looked out his window. Nothing but empty yard and the bunkhouse in the distance. But something was wrong. The air felt different. Heavy. He pulled on jeans and boots and ran outside. The screaming had stopped, but now he could hear something else. A low sound, like singing, but not in English. The sound was coming from the direction of the bunkhouse. Bobby grabbed a flashlight from the porch and walked across the yard. His bare chest was covered in goosebumps, and not just from the cold. Every step felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. The bunkhouse door was wide open. Bobby's flashlight beam cut through the darkness inside, and what he saw made his stomach flip. Vincent lay on the floor in a pool of blood. His shirt was torn to shreds. Deep claw marks ran from his chest to his legs. His eyes stared at the ceiling, but they weren't seeing anything anymore. "Oh, God. Oh, Jesus." Bobby backed out of the doorway and threw up in the grass. When he was done being sick, he wiped his mouth and tried to think. Call the sheriff. That was the first thing. Then wake up Granddad and Maria. But as he turned to run back to the house, he saw them. 5 wolves sat in a semicircle around the bunkhouse, huge wolves with silver fur that seemed to glow in the moonlight. They watched Bobby with eyes that burned like car headlights. Bobby froze. His flashlight shook in his hand, making the beam dance across their faces. He'd never seen wolves this big, didn't even know wolves lived in Montana anymore. The biggest one stood up. When it spoke, Bobby's knees almost gave out. "Do not be afraid. Bobby Abernathy, you are not our enemy." Bobby's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. "Vincent Murphy paid his debt," the wolf continued. "He hurt our people for many years. Now his pain is finished. You killed him. We gave him the justice he asked for, the justice he needed." Bobby's mind was spinning. Talking wolves, dead bodies. This had to be a nightmare. Had to be. "This isn't real," he whispered. "It is very real. As real as the blood your family spilled on this land. As real as the children who died in the snow." The wolf stepped closer. Bobby wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't move. "Your great-great-grandfather built this ranch on sacred ground, built it on the bones of our people. For over 100 years, we have waited for justice. I don't understand. We are the spirits of the warriors who died here, the men who fought to protect their families. When the soldiers came, we cannot rest until the debt is paid." Bobby thought about the cattle arranged in triangles, the howling at night, the feeling that something was watching them. You killed the cows too. We marked them as our ancestors were marked, cut and left, to rot, a message your grandfather chose to ignore. Granddad doesn't know about you, about what you are. The wolf's eyes blazed brighter. Samuel Abernathy knows exactly what we are. His grandfather told him the stories about the massacre, about the warnings we gave. Samuel chose to ignore those warnings, just like his family always has. Bobby's legs finally gave out. He sat down, hard in the dirt, flashlight falling from his hands. What do you want from me? That depends on what kind of man you choose to be. The wolf sat down too, like they were having a normal conversation. Your grandfather built his wealth on stolen land and spilled blood. He honors that legacy. He is proud of it. But I'm not my grandfather. No, you are not. We have watched you, Bobby Abernathy, watched you ask questions, watched you seek truth, watched you care about what is right, not just what is profitable. The other wolves moved closer, forming a circle around Bobby. He could smell them now, wild and dangerous, but also somehow sad. Vincent Murphy was called here because his crimes matched your family's crimes. Both hurt our people, both chose violence over justice. The circle is now complete. So what happens now? The big wolf was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. Now you must choose. You can be like your grandfather. Pretend we do not exist. Continue to profit from blood money. In which case, you will face the same justice as Vincent Murphy. Bobby's mouth went dry. Or you can be different. You can acknowledge what your family did. You can try to make it right. How? How do I make right something that happened 150 years ago? Truth first, then action. The land your family stole must be returned. The profits made from our blood must be given back. The story of what happened here must be told. Bobby looked back toward the main house, where his granddad was sleeping. The man who'd raised him, taught him about cattle and horses and hard work. The only family he had left. And if I do that, if I give it all back, then the debt is paid. The dead can rest, and you can live without the weight of your ancestors' crimes on your shoulders. But Granddad will never agree to it. The wolf's eyes went cold again. Samuel Abernathy's time for choosing is over. He has had 60 years to make amends. He chose pride instead. A chill ran down Bobby's spine. You're gonna kill him too. Justice will be served. The only question is whether you will stand with your grandfather's crimes or against them. Bobby buried his face in his hands. Everything he'd ever known was falling apart. The ranch, his family's legacy, his whole life. When he looked up, the wolves were still waiting, patient as stones, patient as death itself. I need time to think. You have until sunrise, the big wolf said. Choose carefully, Bobby Abernathy. Choose wisely. Some decisions can never be taken back. The wolves melted into the shadows like they'd never been there at all. But their yellow-green eyes stayed in the darkness, watching, waiting. Bobby sat alone in the dirt next to Vincent's body, trying to figure out how to save his grandfather's life without losing his own soul. Bobby didn't go back to the house. He couldn't face his granddad. Not yet. Instead, he sat in the cold dirt, staring at Vincent's body and trying to make sense of everything. The wolves came back just before dawn. Have you decided? The big one asked. I need to understand first, Bobby said. His voice was hoarse from not sleeping. You say my family killed people, but I need to know what really happened. The wolf nodded slowly. Truth is painful. Are you sure you want to see it? Bobby thought about Vincent's torn body, about his granddad's angry face when they talked about the Indians, about Maria's sad eyes when she mentioned blood stories. I'm sure. The wolf walked closer and sat down in front of Bobby. The others formed a circle around them. Close your eyes. Bobby hesitated, then did as he was told. The wolf's voice became softer like wind through grass. It is winter, 1875. See through our eyes. Feel what we felt. Suddenly, Bobby wasn't sitting in the ranch yard anymore. He was standing in snow, wearing buckskin clothes and moccasins. His breath made clouds in the freezing air. Around him were teepees and campfires, women cooking, children playing, old men telling stories. But something was wrong. The women looked scared. The children stayed close to their mothers. The men kept looking toward the hills. "The soldiers have been watching us for days," said a voice next to him. Bobby turned and saw a young warrior with braided hair and worried eyes. "They want us to leave the sacred hunting grounds." "This is our land," Bobby heard himself say, but it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, older. "Our ancestors are buried here. The spirits of the elk and buffalo live here. We cannot leave. The white settlers want to build on our land. They have papers from the government. Papers mean nothing to the spirits. This ground is holy." Bobby felt the warrior's love for this place, felt how connected he was to every tree, every rock, every blade of grass. This wasn't just land to him. It was home. It was family. It was everything. Then the vision changed. Soldiers on horseback rode into the camp. Not many, maybe 20 men. They wore blue uniforms and carried rifles. Their leader was a young man with blonde hair and cold blue eyes. Bobby recognized those eyes. He'd seen them in old family photographs. "You have 1 hour to pack and leave," the soldier said. "This land now belongs to the United States government." The chief stepped forward. He was old but strong, with gray hair and scars on his arms. "We will not leave. This is sacred ground. Our people have hunted here for 1,000 years. Your people lost the war. Now you follow our laws. There was no war here. We have always been peaceful," the soldier laughed. It was a cold sound like ice breaking. "Peaceful Indians. That's funny." Bobby watched in horror as the soldier raised his rifle and shot the chief in the chest. The old man fell backward into the snow, blood spreading around him like red flowers. The camp exploded into chaos. Women screamed, children cried, warriors grabbed weapons and tried to protect their families. But the soldiers had more guns. Better guns. Bobby felt himself fighting, but it was hopeless. He watched his friends die one by one, watched his wife fall with a bullet in her back as she tried to carry their baby to safety. Watched his son take an arrow in the chest as he fought to protect his little sister. The massacre lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 53 people lay dead in the snow. Men, women, children, elders, all of them. The blonde soldier walked through the bodies, making sure everyone was dead. When he found Bobby's character still breathing, he put his pistol to the warrior's head. "Should have left when I told you to," he said, and pulled the trigger. Bobby screamed and opened his eyes. He was back in the ranch yard, but tears were streaming down his face. His whole body was shaking. "That was my great-great-grandfather," he whispered. "Lieutenant William Abernathy," the wolf confirmed. "He reported it as a battle, said the Indians attacked first. The government gave him a medal and sold him the land for almost nothing. All those people, all those children, buried in a mass. Grave behind where your barn now stands. No markers, no ceremony, just dirt thrown over broken bodies." Bobby threw up again. When he was done, he looked up at the wolf with haunted eyes. "How do I live with this? How do I wake up every morning, knowing what my family did? The same way we have existed for 150 years, with the weight of injustice in your heart. But you have a choice we did not have." "What choice?" "You can make it right." The wolf's eyes grew gentler. "What is your name, Bobby Abernathy?" "Robert James Abernathy, Jr." "No. What is your real name?" "The name in your heart?" Bobby thought about it. Nobody had ever asked him that before. Just Bobby, I guess. "I never liked all the family names, never felt like I fit them." "Good. Bobby is who you are. Not Robert James Abernathy, Jr., heir to blood money. Not the great-great-grandson of a killer. Just Bobby, a young man who must choose what kind of person he wants to be." The sun was starting to rise behind the hills. Bobby could see light in the kitchen window. Maria was probably making breakfast. His granddad would be getting up soon. What exactly do you want me to do? First, tell the truth about the massacre, about how the ranch was really built, about the people who died here. Granddad will deny it. Samuel Abernathy knows the truth. His grandfather told him the whole story before he died. Samuel chose to bury the truth instead of facing it. Bobby remembered his granddad's angry reaction when they talked about the Indians, the way his face had gone red, the way he'd refused to discuss it. What else? Return the land to the Crow Nation. All of it. The ranch, the cattle, everything built with blood money. Bobby's stomach dropped. That's everything we have, everything my family worked for, everything your family stole. Can stolen goods ever truly belong to the thief? Bobby knew the wolf was right, but it still felt like being asked to cut off his own arm. And if I do this, if I give it all back, then justice is served, the debt is paid, we can finally rest. And my granddad? The wolf was quiet for a long moment. Samuel Abernathy has had 60 years to make amends. He chose pride over justice. The spirits of our children cry out for his blood. But if I do what you ask, if you truly commit to making amends, if you dedicate your life to healing the wounds your family caused, then perhaps justice can be mercy instead of vengeance. Bobby heard footsteps on the porch. His granddad was awake. I need more time. Time is what we have given you. Time to choose. Time to be better than your ancestors. The wolf stood up. But choose quickly, Bobby. The sun is rising and Samuel Abernathy is walking toward us. Bobby turned and saw his granddad coming across the yard, still in his pajamas and robe. The old man's face was pale and frightened. Bobby, what are you doing out here? I heard screaming and... Samuel stopped when he saw Vincent's body. Then he saw the wolves. His face went white as snow. Oh, no, he whispered. Oh, God, no, they've come back. The big wolf stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice was full of 150 years of rage. Hello, Samuel. We have been waiting to speak with you for a very long time. Samuel stood frozen in the yard, staring at the wolves. His hands were shaking so badly, he had to grab his robe to keep it closed. You're not real, he whispered. You can't be real. The big wolf's eyes burned like fire. We are as real as the bullets your grandfather put in our children. As real as the blood he spilled on sacred ground. That was a long time ago, over a century. Time means nothing to the dead, Samuel Abernathy. We have waited. We have watched. We have remembered every detail of what your family did. 2 hours. Samuel's legs gave out. He fell to his knees in the dirt, looking older than Bobby had ever seen him. I didn't kill anyone. I wasn't even born yet. But you knew. The wolf stepped closer. Your grandfather told you the truth before he died. Told you about the massacre, about the mass grave, about the blood money that built this ranch. Samuel's face crumpled. He was dying, guilty and scared. He wanted to confess before he met his maker. And what did you do with his confession? I buried it, just like we buried the bodies. Some things are better left in the past. Bobby felt sick, listening to his granddad. You knew? You knew the whole time and you never told me. Samuel looked up at Bobby with tears in his eyes. I was protecting you, boy. Protecting our family's name. What good would it do to dig up old crimes? Old crimes? The wolf's voice was like thunder. Is murder an old crime when the victims never received justice? Is theft an old crime when the stolen goods are still being used? We built something here. 4 generations of hard work, built on the bones of children, grown rich from blood money. Bobby stood up, his mind finally clear. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly what he had to do. Granddad, we have to make this right. Samuel stared at him. What? We have to give the land back, all of it. We have to tell people what really happened here. Are you out of your mind? This ranch is worth millions. It's our entire life. It's not our life. It's their death. Bobby pointed to the wolves. It never belonged to us. Samuel struggled to his feet, anger replacing fear on his face. I won't let you destroy everything our family built. I don't care if these things are real or not. He turned toward the house. I'm calling the sheriff. This is all just a bad dream brought on by stress and... The wolf moved faster. Then lightning. Suddenly he was blocking Samuel's path, teeth bared. There will be no sheriff, no running away, no more lies. Samuel stumbled backward, falling on his rear end again. The time for choosing is over, Samuel Abernathy. You have spent 60 years profiting from murder, 60 years refusing to acknowledge the children your grandfather slaughtered. Please, Samuel begged. I'm an old man. I never hurt anyone myself. You hurt them every day you stayed silent. Every day you lived off blood money. Every day you chose comfort over justice. Bobby stepped between his granddad and the wolf. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. Wait, he's still my granddad. I love him, even if he's wrong. The wolf looked at Bobby with something like respect. Love is good, Bobby, but love cannot erase injustice. I know. But maybe there's another way. What way? Bobby took a deep breath. Let me try to convince him. Give me a chance to help him do the right thing. The wolf considered this. You would risk your own life for a man who has chosen selfishness over truth. He raised me. He's the only family I have left. If I can save him, if I can help him choose justice instead of pride, and if you cannot, Bobby looked down at his granddad, then back at the wolf. Then justice has to come first, even if it breaks my heart. The wolf nodded slowly. Wisdom and courage. Your spirit is different from your grandfather's. Give me until tonight, one day to try. The dead have waited 150 years. We can wait one more day. The wolf's eyes never left Samuel's face. But understand this, Bobby Abernathy. If your grandfather continues to choose pride over justice, if he continues to deny what his family did, then he will join Vincent Murphy in death. The wolves melted back into the shadows like smoke, but Bobby could feel them watching from the hills. Samuel was crying now, big tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. Bobby, you can't seriously be thinking about giving up the ranch. Everything we are is tied up in this land. No, Granddad, everything we stole is tied up in this land. Bobby helped the old man to his feet and walked him back to the house. Maria was waiting on the porch, her face pale but not surprised. You heard everything, Bobby said. I have been waiting for this day since I was a little girl, Maria said quietly. My grandmother always said the spirits would return when the time was right. Inside, Bobby made coffee while Samuel sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Finally, Samuel spoke. Even if we wanted to make amends, how could we? The people who died are gone. Their families are scattered. We can't bring back the dead. But we can honor them, Bobby said. We can tell their story. We can make sure people know what really happened here. And destroy our family's reputation in the process. Our family's reputation is built on lies, Granddad. Maybe it's time for some truth. Samuel looked up with desperate eyes. You don't understand what you're asking. This ranch is all we have. Without it, we're nothing. We're nothing with it, too. Not if it's built on murder. Bobby sat down across from his granddad. I saw it, Granddad. The wolves showed me what really happened. I saw our ancestor shoot an old chief in cold blood. I saw him murder children who were just trying to protect their families. Samuel's face went gray. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Grandfather said it got out of hand, said he tried to stop it, but he didn't stop it. He led it, he bragged about it, he got a medal for it. Times were different then. Murder was murder then too. They sat in silence again. Outside, Bobby could hear cattle lowing in the distance. Normal ranch sounds on a morning that was anything but normal. "What exactly are you proposing?" Samuel asked finally. "First, we tell the truth. We contact the Crow Nation and tell them what we know about the massacre. We help them find the mass grave and give those people a proper burial." Samuel winced like he'd been hit. "Second, we return the land. All of it. We sign it over to the Crow Nation and let them decide what to do with it. Bobby, that's everything we own. It was never ours to own." Samuel stood up and walked to the window. He stared out at the fields his family had worked for over a century. "And what happens to us? Where do we go?" "I don't know. But maybe that's not the most important question right now." Samuel turned around, and Bobby saw something in his granddad's eyes he'd never seen before. Not anger or pride or stubbornness. Fear. Real, bone-deep terror. "You don't understand," Samuel whispered. "If we admit what happened, if we give back the land, it won't stop there. There will be lawyers, investigators. They'll want to know about other things, about how we've treated people over the years, about deals we made to keep the truth buried." Bobby felt cold. "What other things?" Samuel's face crumpled. "We weren't the only family involved in the massacre, Bobby. Wasn't the only cover-up. This whole valley was built on blood and lies. Then maybe it's time for all of it to come out. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know who you're up against." Before Bobby could ask what he meant, they heard howling from the hills, long and mournful and getting closer. The sun was starting to set. Time was running out. The howling grew louder as darkness fell. Bobby could see shapes moving in the hills around the ranch. Not just 5 wolves now, dozens of them, all walking toward the house. Samuel was pacing the living room like a caged animal. "They're coming for me, aren't they?" "Only if you keep choosing pride over justice," Bobby said. "You don't understand. Even if I wanted to make amends, it's too late. The things our family has done, the secrets we've kept, it goes beyond just the massacre." Bobby grabbed his granddad's arm. "Then tell me everything. Maybe we can still fix this." Samuel looked out the window at the approaching wolves. His whole body was shaking. After the massacre, other ranchers came. The Hendersons, the Millers, the Crosses. They all knew what happened here. Some of them helped cover it up. In exchange, they got cheap land too. How many people knew? Half the valley, maybe more. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. "We made a pact. Nobody would ever talk about the Indians. Nobody would ever investigate the mass grave. We'd all keep quiet and prosper together." Bobby felt sick. For over 100 years, we passed the secret down through our families, made sure our kids knew to keep their mouths shut, threatened anyone who tried to tell the truth. Threatened how? Samuel couldn't meet Bobby's eyes. There was a Crow man in the 1950s, a survivor's grandson, who came asking questions about his family, about what happened to them. "What did you do to him?" We made sure he stopped asking questions. The howling was getting closer. Bobby could see yellow eyes in the darkness outside. "Granddad, what did you do?" "We didn't kill him," Samuel said quickly, "but we hurt him, burned down his house, ran him out of town, made sure he knew what would happen if he came back." Bobby sank into a chair. The weight of his family's crimes felt like a mountain on his chest. "There's more," Samuel continued. "Native families who tried to visit the area, researchers who wanted to study local history. We found ways to scare them off or discredit them." A loud crash came from the kitchen. Maria appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "They're here," she said simply. The front door opened without anyone touching it. The big wolf walked in like he owned the place. Behind him came 4 more wolves, their eyes blazing in the lamplight. Samuel fell to his knees. "Please, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't kill me." The wolf looked down at him with something like pity. "Samuel Abernathy, you have had all." day to choose justice. What is your answer? Samuel looked at Bobby, then back at the wolf. When he spoke, his voice was small and broken. I choose my grandson's life over my own pride. If Bobby thinks this is right, then I'll do it. You will. Return the land? Yes. You will tell the truth about the massacre? Yes. You will help find the mass grave and give our people proper burial? Samuel was crying now. Yes. All of it. Whatever it takes. The wolf studied Samuel's face for a long moment. Then he turned to Bobby. And you, Bobby Abernathy, will you dedicate your life to healing the wounds your family caused? Bobby stood up. His voice was steady and sure. I will. I'll work with the Crow Nation. I'll help tell their story. I'll make sure this never happens again. Even if it means giving up everything. Even if it means living poor instead of rich. Money built on blood isn't worth having, the wolf nodded slowly. We see truth in your hearts, both of you. It has taken 4 generations, but finally an Abernathy chooses justice over comfort. The other wolves moved closer, forming a circle around Bobby and Samuel. But words are not enough, the big wolf continued. You must prove your commitment with actions. What do you want us to do? Tomorrow, you will contact the Crow Nation. You will confess your family's crimes. You will sign papers giving back. All the land. All of it. Every acre. Every building. Every dollar earned from this blood money. Bobby nodded. Done. You will also contact the authorities. The FBI. The Department of Justice. You will tell them about the other families. About the conspiracy to hide the truth. Samuel made a choking sound. They'll arrest us. Prosecute us. Justice requires accountability, the wolf said. You cannot heal wounds by hiding from consequences. But I'm an old man. Prison will kill me. The wolf's eyes softened slightly. Perhaps. But your silence has already killed our children's memory. Which death is more important? Samuel was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. You're right. I've been a coward for 60 years. Maybe it's time to be brave. The wolf looked satisfied. There is one more thing. You must help us find our children's bones. Help us give them the burial they were denied. Where do we start? You know where they are buried. Your grandfather told you. Samuel closed his eyes. Behind the barn, there's a small hill covered with trees. He said they threw the bodies in a pit and covered them with dirt and rocks. Bobby felt tears running down his face. All those years playing near that hill as a child. All those times he'd climbed those trees, and underneath, the bones of children who died trying to protect their families. We'll find them, Bobby promised. We'll bring them home. The wolf stepped closer to Bobby. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. You have chosen wisely, young man. Your spirit is clean. Your heart seeks justice. For this, our people will remember you not as an enemy, but as a friend. What happens now? Now the healing begins. It will take years, maybe generations, but truth is the first step toward peace. The wolf turned to Samuel. You, old man, have little time left on this earth. Use it wisely. Spend your remaining days making amends instead of excuses. Samuel nodded, looking older but somehow lighter, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. And Vincent? Bobby asked. What about him? Vincent Murphy paid his debt in full. His spirit is at peace now. His guilt no longer eats at him. The wolves began to move toward the door, but the big wolf stopped and looked back. Bobby Abernathy, we give you a gift. What gift? Protection. As long as you keep your promise, as long as you work for justice, our spirits will guard you. No harm will come to you from those who want to keep the old secrets buried. You mean the other families? They will not be happy when the truth comes out. They will try to stop you, but they cannot fight the spirits of the dead. The wolf smiled. showing teeth like white stars. Besides, you will not be alone in this fight. There are others who have waited long for the truth to surface. Allies you do not yet know about. And then they were gone, like smoke in the wind, like dreams at dawn. Bobby and Samuel stood in the quiet living room, listening to the normal sounds of night, crickets chirping, wind through the trees, cattle settling down for sleep. "Are we doing the right thing?" Samuel asked. Bobby looked out the window at the peaceful ranch that would soon belong to its rightful owners. "For the first time in 5 generations, Granddad, we're doing the right thing." The next morning, Bobby called the Crow Nation tribal offices, then the FBI, then every newspaper in Montana. Within a week, the story was national news. Other families in the valley were arrested. The mass grave was found and excavated. 53 bodies were given proper burial in a ceremony attended by hundreds of people. Bobby signed over the ranch deed to the Crow Nation. They turned part of it into a cultural center and memorial. The rest stayed as it was. Good grazing, land for cattle, but now owned by the people whose ancestors had died protecting it. Samuel lived for 2 more years. He spent them working with tribal elders, sharing everything he knew about the massacre and the cover-up. When he died, the Crow Nation gave him a traditional burial, honoring his choice to seek justice over comfort. Bobby stayed on as a caretaker for the memorial. He learned the Crow language. He married a teacher from the reservation. They raised their children to know the true history of the land they lived on. And sometimes, on clear nights when the moon was full, Bobby would see silver shapes running through the hills. But they weren't hunting anymore. They were free. Finally, after a century and a half, they were at peace. The dead had found their justice, the living had found their truth, and the land remembered both.